Ever since releasing my video on how to stream on Mac, it's been gaining lots of popularity, and also at the same time, people have been having lots of issues. So the main issue people have been having is with audio, and that stems back to Sunflower and WavTap not working correctly for them. So this video, hopefully I'll be able to settle some things out for you guys and help you guys figure it out. So based on comments and my personal experience, ever since the video, I've basically come to the conclusion that WavTap is a buggy, sort of not working, weird program. So we're gonna have to just skip that now, and we're gonna go to Sunflower, and I'll try to show you guys how that works and hopefully how you guys can get it to work for you. Alright, so first thing you want to do is go to the Sunflower website where you can download it. They have handed it over to the link in the description to, clear it on computer. And then once you do that, go ahead and open Sunflower.
Okay, I'm getting your computer's audio.
Sunflower bed, I should say.
That should
And
be
then
the
once you
case.
have it open,
Exactly, yes. What the fuck?
you're going to click on it and click on built-in output.
Okay.
Now once you do that, you're going to go to your system preferences, audio or
Built-in output.
sound settings. So this one. Keep your input to whatever microphone you want. Go to your output, and on your output choose Sunflower 2 channel.
Input. Go back to input now. Pick aggregate device.
have the most number of seats due to the population base here in Yellowknife. And so as a result, Yellowknife, I would say, has a significant influence in our territorial legislature. So we're hopeful that that tonight's discussions through this candidates forum will have also connect with the Aboriginal population here in the city. The city has also one of the largest Aboriginal populations at nearly 50% of the community. So this is a chance for the Aboriginal population here in Yellowknife, in our capital city, to hear from our Yellowknife candidates on some of the issues that are important to them and hopefully all of us, and so that maybe we engage this votership more throughout this election. So we get to also listen to this event through our live streaming site, and which is being dealt with on the other side of the room, thanks to one of our founding members, Eugene Boulanger, helping us out there. And you can find information if you're already listening, or if you want to forward the information to other people that can't be here this evening, is you can find the information for our live streaming at denenahjo.com and look up our blog, and there will be a link to the live streaming option. Or you could tweet it out and follow us on Twitter. Our handle is Dene Nahjo, and use the hashtag that's common for this election, the ELXNWT hashtag. I'm going to hand it over to my co-host here.
Hi again, everyone. If you missed as well, my name is Megan Wahlberg. I'm a journalist from Fort Smith, and I'm going to be one of the moderators this evening. I have the pleasure of introducing our candidates for this evening. Because there are 22 candidates in Yellowknife, we've divided it over 2 evenings, so hopefully you can come again tomorrow and check out what the other candidates in the other districts have to say. But this evening we have represented candidates for the district of Frame Lake. We have Jan Fullerton, we have Kevin O'Reilly, Roy Erasmus, David Waslichu. I tried my hardest. I even asked beforehand. For Great Slave, we have Glenn Abernathy and Chris Clark, and Cam Lake, Kieran Testart, Dave Ramsey, and for Range Lake, Daryl Delaney and Carolyn Cochran. And the candidates are going to have a chance to give some opening statements. So I'm just going to go over the ground rules and the format of tonight's forum. Just so you know, the candidates were given some questions a couple of days ago so that they were able to prepare for tonight's discussion. And those questions, some of them were created by members of Dene Nahjo, but also came submitted by concerned citizens, a mix of NGOs and grassroots organizations. So we sorted out the themes and created the questions that way. Candidates are going to start with opening statements of 45 seconds. And then we're going to proceed to an equal time question and answer period. And the questions are going to be drawn in no particular order. And the order of the response is going to change each round. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. And our timekeeper, Mandy McDonald, who's also a founding member of Dene Nahjo, she's going to be showing the candidates the time based on some colored cards. So the green card is to begin. The yellow card is when you have 30 seconds remaining, and the red card is to stop. And then at around 8 p.m., we're hoping to open it up for questions from the floor, as well as questions that we're getting from our social media. And we've also created a space at the back at the table. When you come in, there's a place where you can submit written questions. If you don't feel comfortable going up to the podium and asking them directly, you can submit written questions that way. And then the candidates will have time for closing statements, and those are going to be 45 seconds as well. And yeah, just a reminder, it's going to be live streamed, and there are members of media present. So thank you very much for joining us. We can start with the opening statements, so in no particular order. We'll have the candidates for Frame Lake, beginning with Jan.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me here tonight. I've been in the North for 13 years, and in that 13 years, I've traveled around to a lot of communities in the NWT. I was doing it mostly through a youth service organization where I was working to introduce kids to career opportunities in the north, and I saw a lot of things that I couldn't fix through that organization, so I decided to run, and I will listen to the voices and the needs of Indigenous people if I'm elected.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Thanks. Just want to start by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Yellowknives Dene First Nation. I want to thank Dene Nahjo for organizing this important event. I've lived in the Frame Lake riding for 24 years now. I think one of the best ways to predict how a person may act is to look at their track record. I first came to Yellowknife in 1985, and I worked as the land use planning coordinator for the Dene Nation. I served as the executive assistant to the Dene National Chief. As a city councillor, I negotiated a memorandum of understanding between the City of Yellowknife and the Yellowknives Dene First Nation. And most recently, I've worked closely with Yellowknives Dene First Nation during the Giant Mine Environmental Assessment and the successful negotiation of a Giant Mine Environmental Agreement. I look forward to participating in the forum tonight. Thanks.
Mr. Erasmus?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. First of all, I'd also like to acknowledge that we're having this forum on the traditional territory of the Yellowknives Dene First Nation, of which I am a member. And I'd like to thank Dene Nahjo for putting on this forum. As many of you know, I was born and raised here, so your issues are my issues. I'm running for MLA because I see too many problems that are persisting with the current approach of the government. Basically, I guess you could say too many things are being done in ways that are not in the best interests of Yellowknifers and Northwest Territories. With that, I'd like to thank you.
All right, David?
Hi everyone, my name is David Waseltsu, and I'm running here on Frame Lake for two reasons. One, I think we need to put Northerners first in decision making. We have to make decisions that and reflect how they actually impact people in their daily lives here in the NWT. I think that's fundamental to what we're doing as government. And secondly, I think we need to change the tone of discussion in government. Too often there's not an actual emphasis on building consensus and having agreement and actually getting things accomplished rather than just having discussion and arguing. So I think we need to change those tones of discussion. That's why I'm running, and at the same time, I'd like to thank the Yellowknives Dene for hosting us, and thank Dene Nahjo for hosting this forum tonight. I think it's a really interesting spread of issues, and it's going to be great to have this discussion. Thanks.
All right, next we're going to go to Great Slave, starting with Glenn Abernethy.
I'd like to first start by thanking Dene Nahjo for hosting this forum here on the traditional territories of the Yellowknife Dene First Nation. My name is Glenn Abernethy. I'm born and raised in the Northwest Territories. I'm a two-term MLA and a one-term minister. I believe in the Northwest Territories, and I believe in the people of the Northwest Territories, and I'm running in order to make the lives of the people better here in the Northwest Territories. I want, like you want, a strong, healthy, resilient Northwest Territories, and I think working together in the 18th Assembly, we have an opportunity to make some real progressive changes in the way we're doing business and the way we're providing services for all residents of the Northwest Territories. So I'm running for re-election so that I can be there to help make those progressive changes. Thank you.
Mr. Clark?
Hi, I'm Chris Clark, and I am Yellowknife Chippewan, and I am a member of the Titsuk-A Dene First Nation in Titsuk-A, and I'd like also to thank the Yellowknives Dene First Nation for hosting this, and the Dene Nahjo for putting this event on, especially Iris. I just wanted to say that I'm excited to run because I think there's a lot of change that needs to happen, and I just see a lot of things not progressing quickly enough with the government, and there's a lot of issues for Aboriginal people that aren't being addressed, as well as other Yellowknifers and people from Northwest Territories. So I'd just like to thank you again.
All right, now we'll hear from the candidates from Cam Lake, beginning with Kieran to start.
I'd like to thank the Yellowknife Dene for welcoming us here in their traditional territory. I'd also like to thank Dene Nahjo and all of you for coming out tonight. I'm Kieran Testart, and I'm running to represent Cam Lake. I'm a proud Northerner, father, and public servant. My experience has given me an understanding of your needs, and I've created a plan that works for you. For many years, I've worked hard to make reconciliation and a nation-to-nation relationship with Indigenous peoples a priority for politics at all levels of government. I'll continue this priority as your MLA for Cam Lake with a plan for open and accountable government that is committed to consultation, accommodation, and informed consent. I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Ramsey.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name's David Ramsey. I'm the MLA for Cam Lake, current MLA. Been the MLA for the past 12 years. I've got 5 years of political experience with the City of Yellowknife as a Yellowknife City Councillor. I'm a taxpayer here in Yellowknife. I've got a young family with 4 children, 18 years in politics. I'm very proud of the accomplishments of this last government. I think we've done a lot of work on repairing relationships with Aboriginal governments across the Northwest Territories. And we have a long ways to go, and we understand the challenges, and we're up to that challenge. And certainly settling the 2 large outstanding claims in the Northwest Territories, that being the Decho and Acacho claims, are certainly a priority for me. And I certainly look forward to answering any questions folks may have this evening. And I want to thank the rest of the participants here tonight and the moderators as well. Thank you.
Thank you. For Range Lake, could we have Daryl Delaney begin?
Thank you, merci. Welcome to the Dene Nahjo organizers, the moderators, and of course our drummers earlier today. I see this forum as about relationship building, but more importantly, it's about creating partnerships with our youth leadership here, and I'm very impressed with them. It's about living in harmony with First Nations governments, and the journey of a strong and effective public consensus government is about building trust and relationships with all of us. We know we need leaders who are visionaries. We need leaders who know how to listen, but more importantly, we need leaders who know how to hear the needs of the people. The North has been good to me and my family. 4 years ago, I started my journey giving back to the community that I love, and when I was elected as MLA for Range Lake. And I take great pride in helping the people, and if elected again, I want to continue that work, not only for the people of Range Lake, but for all Northerners. Thank you.
All right, and Ms. Carolyn Cochran.
I want to start again by saying thank you to the Dene Nahjo as our host of the forum, and to the Yellowknife Dene First Nation, whose traditional land we sit on. My name is Caroline. My family moved here in 1963. I have a degree in social work, and I'm Métis. Although I qualify as a P1 candidate, I've chosen to provide the last 20 years of my work working within community-based nonprofit organizations, because I believe that they have the most need and the most hope for our future. It's kind of ironic that 50%, just over 50% of the population in the NWT is Indigenous, and yet within my last 20 years of work, more than 90% of the families that come through me actually are Indigenous. So this says a lot. It basically says that the current system of governance is not working, and we need to change it. So I really look forward to the questions tonight.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to start the question time, and I just want to remind candidates to make sure that you're paying attention to our timekeeper, or else she might cut you off. All right, so our first question is going to go to Great Slave, and we'll start with Chris Clark this time, and Amos is going to ask the question.
Okay, first question is number 13. Just to remind everybody in the audience, these questions were provided ahead of time to the candidates. And question 13 is theme, housing and homelessness. So there is a housing crisis in many communities across the Northwest Territories, including Yellowknife. Name the steps you will take to eradicate homelessness and create affordable housing options for the most vulnerable members of our communities.
Hi, so yeah, this is actually particularly touching issue for me, that the homeless people in this town is just, the need is getting greater and greater, and you can just go downtown and see that. I think poverty in the NWT, and especially in this cohort of people, are just continually increasing, and it's really sad to see. So I think some of the things that we really need to do is to have a center for homelessness where people have a 24-hour place to stay. They have a home. It might be a simple accommodation, but they can stay there. It would be a wet facility, I would believe, because, you know, we have to change people's situations before we can start helping them with their problems. It could be a center where we would have counseling and AA programs that would be there. And I think that, you know, the housing needs to come first, and then we'll help these people with their problems. They're not getting help on the street, that's for sure. And they're not getting help across the street from the liquor store. So I think it's really important to have that place that they can call home, and then transition them into other types of housing, low-cost housing, et cetera, and getting them educations and putting them into the workforce as much as we can possibly. Thank you.
Okay, next on deck is Glenn Abernathy.
Thank you. I've had an opportunity to travel all over the Northwest Territories to the different communities. And one of the things that's frustrating for me in particular when I travel to the communities is seeing the number of actually vacant houses that are government owned in all of the communities, houses that should be used either for public housing or for home ownership. I also know that there's a large number of individuals who would like to take access or to access those homes, but they don't match the programs that we exist, which suggests the programs don't work. I think we need to look at some of our home ownership programs here in the Northwest Territories, as well as some of our subsidy programs for renting, to find ways to actually occupy those houses in the communities and help address some of the housing shortages or the housing needs in those communities. In Yellowknife, there's a large number of different groups that are currently trying to address homelessness, whether it's the group that's recently come forward with Gino Pinn at the lead, or whether it's the City of Yellowknife with the Mayor's Task Force on Homelessness, or the Community Access, or the community group that's working on that as well, and the Housing Corp. So there's a large number of groups that are working on the same thing with Housing First as the base model. That's providing housing for individuals and then helping them transition into rental or home ownership. I'm frustrated that there's all these groups working at odds or separate. We need to bring those groups together and find a way to collaborate, to find a way to utilize the housing stock in town, work with industry who is keenly eager to participate and move forward with a Housing First model here in Yellowknife. I do know that the government of the Northwest Territories is utilizing their, look, stop.
Thank you for stopping.
I could have kept going.
That's the point of the timekeeper. So we got next is Cam Lake, and we're going to start with Dave Ramsey.
Same question, and I would have to say that you know, we have to have a coordinated approach to this. I think we've had a number of different folks go off and take a look at this, but it's time that we meet the matter head on, and the coordinated effort is something that's required. And certainly our government is ready to help out in that effort. We've had a number of meetings with the City of Yellowknife, and I know I've had meetings with downtown business owners. Something has to happen here. We have to make some progress on this, and we're only going to do that by continuing to work together to find solutions that are going to make a difference. And I believe that we can accomplish that if we continue to work together. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to move into the next riding of Frame Lake. Oh, excuse me, sorry about that. I'm the one making mistakes, my bad. Kieran, test start.
Thank you. I think that it's good that we make that commitment to work in partnership, but we need to get the work done, and government can be a leader on this file. And my plan commits to a $400,000 pilot program in the City of Yellowknife. The Homeful Coalition, who I've spoken to as well, as many people at this table have, is committed to providing solutions right away. And they are working on creating markets, or giving up market spaces to this project. So we can work with them to get these units on the ground right away. And they're committed to housing people right away. And I think we should show, the GNWT should show leadership and take the lead on this with a pilot program. We should access the new federal funding available with the new government that's of Canada that's committed to both Housing First funding and to creating more affordable rental units across the country. So we should be accessing that funding and providing more affordable rental units for folks who need a bit of a break on their rent bills. And, take an inventory of the existing housing we have available, government housing, and see what we can refurbish and what we can provide at market rates to individuals who are in need of housing. So there are things we can do, and government needs to be a leader on this. We can't just work in partnership. We need to take point and get some results on the ground for people in need. Thank you.
So now we will move to the frame lake riding. And now we're going to begin with David Weselsu.
We'll get there. In an effort not to repeat some of the things we've heard, I mean, the Housing First strategy for Yellowknife has been adopted by City Council, and it's an important thing to do, and the GNWT needs to partner with the city to make sure it can actually happen. On top of that, we need to identify the types of housing that are needed. We need availability of housing stock. We need to look at early intervention on homelessness so we can prevent people from going homeless before they are. We also need to expand programs beyond income support housing. So we need rent geared to income. Right now in the industry, once you get out of off income support, there's very little programming to help you get into full market rate housing. We need additional programs to help community organizations do that sort of thing, to help you move through the whole transition and cycle from homelessness. Going into switch from basic support to full market rent isn't something that most people can do, and that's a problem, and that just gets people back in the cycle. So we need to look at the whole picture of homelessness and make sure we can take people all the way through it to get them in houses. We need to be innovative in our housing stock. We need housing stock beyond just Yellowknife. We need it in communities as well. I'd worked previously with some organizations in Nunavut that had done a whole bunch of work with private industry to even sea lift in, build houses and get housing into remote communities. It's possible, and it's been done in other parts of the north, and it's the kind of model that we need to look at here. We need housing stock and modern housing stock and in good repair all across the north, and it's something we really need to focus on as the GNWT. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Next, we have Roy Erasmus.
Thank you. Yeah, the homeless situation here in Yellowknife is one of the reasons why I'm running for MLA. At one time, we knew all the people that hung around on front of the post office there. Not so today. Most of those people are not from here. And so we desperately need to do something. And we know that Medicine Hat has virtually eliminated their homeless problem through a program called Housing First. So I would want to try to implement a similar program in the Northwest Territories. And there's also already a group of Yellowknife businessmen called Yellowknife's Homeful Partnership, and they're trying to do something. They want to get a certain amount of people off the streets by the end of November. I would support them every way I could, and particularly to help them establish a storefront location in Yellowknife so that programs are run out of one place. I would also support them to leverage funding from the GNWT and the federal government. And like other people, I have also seen a lot of empty housing corporation houses, and we should be turning those units over to people so that they can live in. And I would certainly support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Kevin O'Reilly, please.
Thanks, Amos. As we get down closer to the bottom of the list, I'm not sure there's much else I can add, but homelessness does cost our economy in Canada $7 billion a year. And other folks have talked about a housing first approach, and you have to meet people's basic needs in terms of housing before you can start to deal with some of the other issues and problems. Here in Yellowknife, we've got some pretty good transitional housing started for women, for men, for youth. But we need to look at constructing and rehabilitating affordable units here in Yellowknife. Some of that may involve some market-based approaches using subsidies and grants. And GNWT has started to do some of this work. It's working quite well in Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, and Ontario are starting to look at this approach. But it's not really quite enough. GNWT is also providing some additional funding to the NWT Housing Corp to get some additional units built. But what we need to do is really create communities of support for people who are vulnerable. And I think some of the other candidates have talked about bringing together some of these efforts. I've talked to the mayor, Mayor Hike here in Yellowknife, and in Victoria, there was a very successful task force put together of a variety of different interests with a specific time and mandate to report back, and I think that's something that we should support here. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Jan Fullerton.
So a lot of my colleagues have talked about housing first. That's also a solution that I support and think should move forward. The key, or one of the key aspects of housing first is the idea, speaking of it as the most vulnerable members of society and their needs. The housing first concept is geared towards people who also have co-occurring challenges with mental health and addictions. And mental health and addictions is a core part of my platform. It's something that I think that we are underserving in the Northwest Territories right now. So in order for Housing First to be effective, we have to ensure that those supports are in place as well, that people have access to assertive community treatment, and that they can get the counseling and the social supports they need in order to succeed in making positive changes in their life through a Housing First initiative. So I do support it. I just want to make sure that we're doing it with all those supports in place. But further than that, in the rest of the Northwest Territories, as I've traveled to different communities and talked to schools there in particular about what they run into as far as the costs of building maintenance and repair, one thing that keeps coming up is the cost of bringing in contractors. So I would like us to see us doing more to build capacity in small northern communities so that the repair work can be done there locally, and that I think would help to bring down the cost of housing and housing maintenance.
Thank you, Jan. We are going to move over to the last riding we have here this evening, and that's the Range Lake riding. And we're going to begin with Caroline Cochran, please.
Okay. Well, this is my topic. Currently, I'm the CEO of the Yellowknife Women's Society, which provides emergency shelter to homeless women. Again, Indigenous people are overrepresented within the homeless population. The GNWT needs to ensure that the federal government keeps its promise to provide infrastructure monies for homes within the north. I would also support the GNWT working with the municipal government to implement the Housing First model that people have talked about, but only if wraparound support is provided, which might just mean that 24-hour on-site support is needed in some cases. I don't want to see people set up to fail. The Housing First model also needs to be reviewed through an Indigenous lens, as it's based in the South, and the North has a special population, so we need to consider that. And we need to have full cooperation with the Indigenous organizations, the emergency homeless shelters, and homeless people. This got to be stressed. Currently within the municipal government, there are none of those representatives on their committee. So it's people that aren't experiencing the issues that are actually trying to solve it. We also need to continue the work of the anti-poverty strategic framework. I would, however, like to take a moment to really congratulate the Homeful Partnership, which is a dozen or so people, business people, organized through Gino Pin, that have done awesome.
The last word goes to Daryl Delaney.
Great, thank you, Messi. I want to take a moment to thank the many stakeholders that were behind the anti-poverty strategy and the many plans that we've seen over the recent years. I think that was a very good start. And now recently, as you've heard, we have a new organization on the Homeless Partnership Coalition for a Housing First initiative, which I also believe is a very good initiative, which I'll support. However, I still believe the GNWT is playing around the edges. We started off good with a $2.4 million injection back in 2013, but since then, with only 2 budgets, we've only added $500,000 to the budget in 2 years. And to put that in perspective, that's probably less than 1 kilometer of new highway. So that just tells you how much emphasis we have on homelessness. If you compound this with the sliding scale that we see with CMHC in our overall housing stock, we do have a recipe for disaster. So the bottom line, The Anti-Poverty Action Plan Advisory Committee has clearly stated that GNWT is not putting their money where their mouth is, nor the energy behind this initiative. So if elected, I promise that I'll make the necessary targeted investments in housing options and the Housing First program. Merci.
All right, thank you, everyone. Our next question is about water, and it was actually submitted to us by the Council of Canadians NWT chapter. Climate change is just one of the many threats to our water. What actions will you take to protect our northern watersheds? And we're going to begin with the Cam Lake riding, starting with Huron Testart.
This is a very important issue for Canada, and the Northwest Territories is no exception. We don't have a national water strategy, and we need to have one. Our water is one of our most precious natural resources, and we need to find a way to protect it that's effective and efficient. So I would commit the GNWT to actually develop its own water strategy and continue to work on trans-boundary agreements with other provinces where we share water boundaries, and also partner with the federal government to produce a national water strategy. Also, we need to be cognizant of the industrial processes and natural resource processes that use water and use it extensively. I stand opposed to implementing fracking, which is a huge user of water, of fresh water, and water we can't get back. It can't be reclaimed. And to put hold on that until we have scientific evidence that gives us a clear answer on the long-term costs of fracking. So all of those things need to be thought of together when we talk about our water and talk about preserving it for future generations. Thank you.
Mr. Ramsey?
Thank you very much. We have done a great deal of work on protecting the water here in the Northwest Territories through the Minister of ENR. We just recently signed a transboundary water agreement with the province of British Columbia and Vancouver 2 weeks ago. We continue to move forward with having the authority now over protecting the environment here in the Northwest Territories and the water. And we worked a long time in getting the devolution agreement from the federal government that gave us that authority. And who better to be stewards of the water here in the Northwest Territories than elected officials here in the NWT on behalf of residents in the NWT. And we certainly will be moving forward with other transboundary agreements in the future. And this is only the beginning, but I certainly appreciate the question, and the importance of water can't be understated. Thank you.
Moving on to Range Lake, we're going to begin with Daryl Delaney.
Thank you very much. Water is life. Our current pan-territorial agreement that you just heard earlier, that on the Mackenzie Water Basin, I believe is still tethering. Although we do have a couple of partners that have signed on. We have Alberta and BC that have come on board. We are still not finished. The agreement strategy we have this far is very limiting if you actually take the time to read it, and I fear that it does not fully protect all NWT residents who live downstream. I've said many times we need a contingency plan in place in the event of a spill or a catastrophe, and the recent OBED disaster in Alberta is a testament to the lack of tools that we really have. We need a contingency fund established and funded by corporation entities and governments who put our water at risk. Plus, we need concrete and solid legislation for protection and monitoring after such catastrophe. Prevention is the key, but we must also think that about protection and the cost that will affect us in future generations. Thank you.
Caroline Cochran.
I agree, water is one of our most valuable resources that we have. Within the north, we're struggling with climate change, and we need to be concerned with the thawing of the permafrost and the land instability that's bringing, earlier breakups and freeze-ups and the degrading of the sea ice, the increase in the environmental contaminants, and the persistent organic pollutants. As such, because of this, we have a declining wildlife habitats, wetlands and nesting sites, and an influx of invasive species. Therefore, we need to concentrate on supporting best practice educational opportunities to increase our ability to deal with the emerging water management issues, as well as other water licensing issues, challenges, and opportunities. We need to also continue to work with upstream jurisdictions to monitor developments, and we need to work closely with community and Indigenous governments to address these challenges and support Western science as well as traditional knowledge to help Indigenous and fellow Northerners to adapt to climate change. I've got a few minutes. We must protect our watersheds, and as such, it's critical that sustainable environment and protection of our watershed be a priority within any developmental considerations. Thank you.
Thank you. In Frame Lake, we're going to begin with Roy Erasmus.
Hello? Oh, here we go. Okay. This is an area that is important to me since I grew up less than 100 feet from Great Slave Lake. I believe we need to protect our water routes so we can continue to travel as we have in the past. But we also need to be developing our fishing industry, which is a renewable resource, especially now that the caribou are in decline. We have interprovincial water agreements with various provinces, and I believe that we have to make sure that these are implemented effectively, because the agreements are put into place to keep our water the way they are and to ensure that they're protected for future generations. I would also like to see our legislation reviewed to ensure they're up to date. As a legal person, I know that many of our laws are outdated and in some places non-existent. It's also very important to enforce the regulations and laws that we do have in the case of industrial and other pollution. As for fracking, I know that it uses too much water and we don't know very much about it. Not enough anyway, so I also support a moratorium on fracking. Thank you. Until we can review it more thoroughly. Thank you.
Thank you. David Waseltu.
Thanks. So first off, water is such an important relationship with our communities and our people that it's very important that we protect it. The recently signed transboundary agreement with BC and the previously signed Alberta one are hugely important to the safety and quality of our water. One thing about the agreements is that we have to actually make sure that they're enforced and that they have the resources to follow through on the agreements, and we work well with our other partners. Without that, the agreements aren't worth much. Since devolution, and we have greater responsibility for water monitoring and quality in the Northwest Territories. It's extremely important that we continue to resource this function at ENR. It's a big team that works well closely with communities, and this is a really important function. One of the great initiatives that we're doing right now is the GNWT has been training community-driven water testing, and this is huge to make sure people in communities can actually test their own water and see the results and are involved in the process, and this will help us keep the water safe, but also make sure people understand the safety and the quality of the water. Additionally, the GNWT is working with a couple of Canadian foundations, I think the Walter Gordon, to take the water monitoring results and try to translate them to being something actually meaningful to people. It's a hugely scientific process with all kinds of different things in the water, but translating it so that people can actually understand what's in our water and the quality of it is something that's vital to actually carrying forward with all this. And finally, before my time's up, I just wanted to say it's really good today to see the federal government having established a Climate Change and Energy Cabinet Committee. Them putting an emphasis on this is vital to our partnership with them.
We're going to have to ask you to stop. Thank you very much. Jan Fullerton.
Well, I was also going to speak to the bilateral water management agreements, but I think that's been covered by other people at the table. I do think we also need to look at putting more effort and resources into reducing, reusing, and recycling. Plastics can take hundreds of years to break down, and even when they do break down, there's often microplastics left in the environment that we can't see. And I am concerned about the impact of that in our environment. It's very hard to get away from plastic in our modern society, but I think that we need to look at how we may be able to make changes in that area. And having more locally produced food, I think, is one way that we can move in that direction because we don't have the excess packaging that comes with commercial food. I also think that we need to look at the protections that are around the resource development industry, although I believe that the resource development industry is still a core part of our economy. We do need to make sure that we're protecting our water at the same time, especially with the type of water infrastructure, if you want to call it that, in the Northwest Territories. We have a lot of karst landforms that allow for easy flow of water underground. So if there's contamination in one part, we really don't have good knowledge or awareness of how far that contamination can spread, which is why we do need to have something that is responsible development for all of the NWT.
Thank you. Kevin O'Reilly?
Yeah, thanks. I'm concerned about the low water levels around Yellowknife, and I think that's partly due to climate change. But like others, I want to recognize the work that Minister Meltenberger has done in terms of the transboundary water agreements with Alberta and BC. But when you look at them, they set up joint objectives, monitoring, consultation, and notification. And there's a lot of work that's going to be required to implement those properly. But those agreements in themselves will not necessarily protect our waters. There's more that needs to be done. The NWT water stewardship strategy, I think, is another initiative that's good and needs to continue to be supported. And it's one of the better initiatives that GNWT has undertaken with regard to resource management, because it has been done in partnership with Aboriginal governments, and it has included components of community-based monitoring. But I think, as some others have talked about, we do need to have a public review of the Northwest Territories Waters Act here. So we should be looking at things like incorporating northern water quality objectives, stronger enforcement, and fees that actually reflect the true value of water. I think we also have to push the new federal government to begin to rebuild and take back some of the regressive changes in federal legislation with regard to water. The Fisheries Act, the Navigable Waters Protection Act, some of the changes to the Mackenzie Valley Resource Management Act, those were not in the best interest of the environment. Thanks.
Thank you. In Great Slave, we'll start with Glenn Abernathy.
Thank you. I'm also going to mention the transboundary water agreements. We have finalized the transboundary water agreements with Alberta and British Columbia, which I think is fantastic, but the agreements themselves are not worth much if we're not actually doing the monitoring and ensuring that the southern jurisdictions or the upstream jurisdictions are not doing the monitoring that was actually promised in those agreements. So we as a government need to monitor them as they monitor the water that's flowing into our jurisdiction. We also really need to conclude the transboundary water agreements with Saskatchewan and Nunavut, where water is also flowing into the Northwest Territories. And I would suggest that we also need to dust off the agreement that we have with the Yukon in light of some of the activities that are going on in the Yukon, particularly around the Peel watershed. So I'd like to see the agreement we have with the Yukon dusted off as well. Water is essential to the well-being of all residents in the Northwest Territories. And like Kevin, I agree that we need to look at our legislation here in the Northwest Territories to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to protect the water here in the Northwest Territories, and we will need to work with all stakeholders and partners, which means all communities in the Northwest Territories as we move forward.
Thank you. Chris Clark.
Thank you. So actually, when I was 18 years old and graduated high school 20 years ago now, I actually got a job with Environment Canada, and a year later I started as an aquatic quality officer with Environment Canada, so this issue is very special to me, and water is life. And you know, I'm really scared right now with all the different problems that are occurring. We have the arsenic in the ground, supposedly frozen by Yellowknife, and that's a ticking time bomb waiting to happen. And we have the tar sands in Alberta. We have this transboundary agreement, but really, what does that mean? There's all these problems that are happening with Aboriginal reserves along the Slave watershed, and that's coming right towards us. And then now there's talk about pushing for fracking, and you know, I just see that as another problem waiting to happen. And I think that we really need to, as the government, make sure that we take a close look at protecting our waters. I don't think a lot's been done in the last quite a few years about that, and I think that's extremely important to do. One thing that we do need to do, obviously, with the transboundary agreement with Alberta is to monitor those waters and increase the scientific approach to ensuring that those waters are staying fresh and clean and not contaminating our land. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We are going to move on to the next question. I'd just like to remind people and those that have just come, you're at the Dene Nahjo Yellowknife Election Forum. Thank you for being here this evening. The candidates have a minute and a half, and we have a timekeeper keeping track of things. And we are also live streaming on the internet. You can go to our website at denenahjo.com and check out our blog to get the streaming information. And we have people here live tweeting as well. The hashtag is ELXNWT. And you can find some tweeting going on about this evening's panel. Moving on, we are going to go over to question number 12. The questions have been provided to the candidates prior to this evening, so they are prepared to be here. Question number 12. Indigenous leaders and communities across the territory are calling for a treatment center in the north. What is your position to eradicate homelessness and create affordable housing? Oh. I'm doing an excellent job here. Scene doubles, scene double. Indigenous leaders and communities across the territory are calling for a treatment center in the north. What is your position on that issue, and what are the ideas for addressing the high levels of addictions in this territory? And we are going to begin with the Range Lake riding, Daryl Delaney.
Thank you, Mussy. You know, the past 4 attempts for a treatment facility in the Northwest Territory has failed for various reasons, and we've heard that many times, not the least that the programs did not work, that there were safety issues, it was too expensive, and we had some staffing issues. But our current system of sending the residents down south for treatment was sold to us as a Band-Aid solution. But sadly, this has actually taken more of a foothold as an everyday life for the north. We clearly have a disconnect with the NWT addictions management and rehabilitation in our own backyard, and I believe this needs to change. If elected, I will continue to pursue a proper NWT treatment facility, and I will offer a whole suite of proven 40 to 90-day programs. I will create partnerships with successful programs like Pound Makers. I will coordinate community treatment models that work alongside with treatment facilities. I will provide meaningful jobs for our northerners, and I'll provide required transparency and reporting on performance measurements of substance abuse in Northwest Territories. And I promise to maintain a daily operational cost between $150 to $200 per patient per day. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not rocket science. It just needs the will for it to happen. If elected, it will happen. Thank you.
Next up, Carolyn Cochran. Thank you.
In my opinion, addictions and mental health are linked and can't be offered without each other. Addiction is also often a vice to mask our trauma and hold back our pain. Within the NWT, substance abuse is the highest amongst Canada, and yet we currently have no treatment centre in our territory. The GNWT needs to, in my opinion, prioritize mental health and addiction support within this next 4-year term. Treatment centres as well need to be family inclusive and culturally relevant, but we also need to provide for alternative treatment support for those of us who don't want to use traditional healing, so we need to have a really inclusive treatment program. Addictions and mental health are really critical issues, and we can't afford to ignore them anymore. We need to act on it now. Thank you.
We are going to move to the Frame Lake riding now. Kevin O'Reilly to begin, please.
Thanks, Amos. I think we're probably going to hear other folks say this as well, that this is a multidimensional problem. It's often linked to poverty and homelessness, and I think it really does require an integrated approach. A northern treatment center alone is not going to solve all the problems and issues. We need to have a whole suite of ways of assisting people. Some of that can include on-the-land programs, community-based programs. Some treatment will require folks going south of 60, but where we can do this here in the north, we should be trying to do that. It also requires a lot of work in terms of aftercare. So once somebody has been through a treatment program, there needs to be appropriate community support for them when they come back to their communities. you know, we have to look at the cost of not doing things, and because if we don't do things, those costs are just shifted to other parts of our society. People end up in the incarceration and justice systems that eats up a lot of valuable resources as well. So we need an integrated, multi-dimensional approach. A treatment center is part of that, but it's not the only answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Jan Fullerton, please.
I feel strongly about the need for us to be working on addictions treatment. I have reservations about a facility, a bricks and mortar facility, as being the solution that we should be looking to first. When I hear of people who have gone to addictions treatment centers in other jurisdictions, when they come back to their communities, the success rate after a year, I've heard some statistics as abysmal as 1 in 100 people is actually still managing to be on the recovery path. And I'm not sure that going to an addictions treatment center, a residential addiction treatment center within the Northwest Territories would have a higher success rate than going to one outside of the Territories. Instead, I would like to see us looking at programs that are more community-based and more holistic and are more inclusive of families, and looking at the underlying trauma that leads to addictions and mental health issues. So I think that we need instead to be taking a therapeutic approach where we are working at addressing the multi-generational trauma that has happened in the northern communities and other communities across Canada. And I don't know that that solution is necessarily going to be an addictions treatment center so much as community-based wellness solutions.
Thank you, Jan. David.
Didn't try it that time. I'd agree with some of the things we've heard. I mean, a treatment center is only one part of the systemic approach to dealing with addictions. We obviously need to deal with the root causes of some of the addictions and the problems that are coming up, both in Yellowknife and in the communities. We need support for people before they can even get treatment. I mean, we need more detox options. We need things to get people ready to make the choice to go to treatment. That's a big part of the puzzle. The aftercare is just as important a piece. I mean, just going through a treatment program and being back into the community doesn't necessarily mean you're going to succeed in it, and odds are you don't. We need to actually talk to the people with the addictions problems about where they want to be treated. It's one thing to design a bunch of programming around things and then not give people an option of where to seek the treatment. It's an important part of it. One thing, though, especially about this treatment option, is that based on the sheer number of people talking about it, and even Doors in Frame Lake, and having the conversations, we need to have more conversations between the government and the public about treatment and addictions. If the Department of Health is thinking that certain types of treatment are more feasible than others, we need to have that conversation broadly as a community. All the people need to be involved in that and understand the decision-making process around that. Right now, that doesn't seem to be happening, and that's why it's such a hot-button issue. And I don't think any of that communication has been going on, so we need to address that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, David Waselsu. I'm going to get it right. Last for this riding in Frame Lake is Roy Erasmus, please.
Thank you. Well, being a recovering alcoholic who sobered up at the Yellowknife Treatment Center many years ago, I agree that we should have a treatment center in the NWT. That center should be a base for and play a coordinating role for the current on-the-land programs that are being done. And they should be working together. And also, all addiction programs should include a nutrition and a vitamin supplement component. There are many treatment centers down south that do this, and once they started doing that, their success rates improved dramatically. And one of the biggest things to be successful in the treatment program is to have an aftercare program. Too many people leave a treatment center and they go back and still try to do the same things they used to, and they don't have an aftercare program and they fail. So we need to ensure that people have an aftercare program. And that's why it's so important to have a treatment center here in the north, because while they're in the treatment center, they can be working on their support program for when they leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. The next riding we're going to move over to is the Great Slave Lake here in Yellowknife, and we begin with Chris Clark.
So, I mean, it's not anything new that addictions in the territories is a huge problem, probably one of the highest rates in Canada, if not Nunavut. Up in the north, we have an extremely high rate of people addicted to substances. And, you know, obviously we know we need a treatment center, and why that hasn't happened yet is astounding to me. But it's not just about that. We need to go, like people have said, to the root cause, education about the cause and effect of substance abuse in Yellowknife, in communities, starting at, you know, a young age in school. We need to have trauma. There's a lot of addictions because of residential school problems and other social issues that have arisen over the last 100 years. I mean, this problem goes back a long time. So to try to get people to change without changing things for them is not really possible. I think we need to have the resources there to let people have counseling and deal with that, as well as, you know, detoxification. I know that if you want to go down south right now to a treatment center, they say that you have to wait 6 weeks. I don't know, and you have to be sober. So I don't know who could be sober for 6 weeks and then go to a treatment center. That seems like they would all be almost treated themselves. So it's a little bit backwards there, and we really need to work together with the communities and with. Thank you.
Glenn Abernathy, please.
Thank you. A minute and a half, eh? It's not a lot of time. So in the life of the last assembly, there was a ministers' forum on addictions, and during that forum, where the chair of the forum, Paul Andrew, traveled around the Northwest Territories to hear what people had to say about dealing with addictions in the Northwest Territories, the clear message was not one option or one model is going to suit all individuals. We need options for people. And one of the options that was identified and highlighted over and over again was the requirement for on-the-land programming. But it wasn't the only thing that was suggested. Facilities were suggested, but not necessarily in the Northwest Territories. Enhanced support for individual at the community level. As a result, the government has moved forward with a number of initiatives. We have provided funding to Aboriginal governments across the Northwest Territories in the area of $1.2 million for them to run treatment-based on-the-land programs. We have also invested in outpatient treatment programs in communities called the Matrix program, where individuals can get community-based treatment. We have also contracted with 4 facilities in southern Canada, and we have actually enhanced or expedited the referral process. We can get individuals who are ready for treatment into treatment facilities within 24 to 48 hours here in the Northwest Territories. So there is no 6-week waiting period. We've utilized these facilities. They're costing us about $140 a day, as opposed to the $440 a day that the northern treatment facilities were costing us. At any given time, we have 12 people in treatment, who have in treatment facilities, and that was true when we had a treatment facility in the north.
Thank you, Glenn Abernathy. Last on this issue is the good riding of Cam Lake, and we get to start with Dave Ramsey. Thank you, David. And last word on this issue is Kieran Testart.
Thank you. We have some very good integrative programs to connect people to resources. Unfortunately, you have to be convicted of a crime first. I think that might be the approach that we need to change, is providing a more integrated wellness navigator program for people who need help, that they can go to perhaps a storefront location where one person can connect them to all the resources available to them when they are in need to address those systemic issues they may be suffering from. A detox center in the Northwest Territories just plain makes sense, and that's why it's such a topic of discussion in this election and has become a key component of many people's platforms. We have a model for this that works in the Yukon, and it is a model that could work here as well. We have new opportunities with the new hospital being built to look at how we can expand our treatment options here in the Northwest Territories. But whatever we do, we need to make sure that any treatment is clinically based but culturally appropriate. And we need to make sure we address those root causes, intergenerational trauma and residential schools, in a respectful way. We have many tools out there for dealing with post-traumatic stress, and we can start applying those and being a real leader on this field in the Northwest Territories. And that's something I think we can all get behind, and something that will help alleviate a lot of the suffering that Northerners go through. And start moving us forward in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the candidates for those thoughtful responses. And I just want to say, I know a minute and a half is really a short amount of time to talk about really important issues like this. We have a lot of important questions we wanted to ask in not a lot of time. So we really appreciate that and welcome discussion with some of the people in the room afterwards if they have further questions for the candidates, to have a little bit of time to mingle before we leave. Our next question this evening is on the topic of women in leadership. Indigenous women are absent as deputy ministers and fill just 20 senior management positions. That's 8% within the territorial government. What do you think needs to happen to ensure that more Indigenous women are acquiring leadership and management roles within the government? And we're going to start in Range Lake with Caroline.
I can't just say you vote for me, right? So Indigenous women are grossly underrepresented within the leadership positions of the current GNWT, and this seriously needs to be addressed. Only 10 of the 60 declared candidates for MLA are women, and only 5 or 6 of us are actually Indigenous women. As such, our top leadership will again be seriously underrepresented, especially if none of us get a seat. We do have some positive things happening in the territories, such as Priority 1 status for Indigenous women, but we need to strengthen this policy through training, support, and promotion of it. The Status of Women has also done some incredible work promoting women in leadership, and we need to support them in continuing with this work. Mentorship programs also work. If you look at the language program that's currently offered in the Decho, there's many women across the territories who have achieved great tasks, and we need to match them up with women that are looking to obtain leadership programs. We have to pay serious attention to women's issues, and we have to have women represent us. A female MLA must be appointed this time as the Minister of Status of Women. It's no longer appropriate for a man to take that position. And finally, I hope the government will look at the proactive steps that Trudeau took by appointing 50% of women to his cabinet. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Delaney.
Thank you. Gender-based balance is an international phenomenon and not limited to the GNWT workforce. It's amplified even more when you factor in the Indigenous disparity in the numbers. So although we've seen decades of slow gains in gender and pay gap, Canada as a whole suffers in stagnation. According to the OECD, we slid 11 spots between 1995 and 2013, and we now rank 19th globally in this area. So to shift this balance, the GNWT needs to lead by example at the grassroots level with proper education investments, higher learning advancement, and incentives. Plus, I believe we need to focus legislation that will cast the right amount of sunshine on these discrepancies, which should by default set a new benchmark in our society for change. For a successful and financially stable economy, women, and especially Indigenous women, need to be represented fairly and paid accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to Great Slave Lake now, and we're going to start with Glenn Abernathy.
Thank you. And when you asked the question, I took it as inside the public service as opposed to outside the public services. So within the public service, we have a number of training programs available in the government of the Northwest Territories, including the Associate Director Training. And that's a training program to help individuals develop the knowledge, skills, and ability they need for senior management roles. We need, as a government, to make sure that we're utilizing that program more effectively for targeted groups like women in management. I know a large number of women in the government of the Northwest Territories who are doing amazing work and are ready to move up, but there aren't necessarily jobs for them. The Associate Director program will give them an opportunity to mere shadow jobs until one of those jobs happens to open, which means they can get the skills they need, if they don't already have them, to move directly into those roles. So I'd like to continue to enhance that program, make sure we're using it appropriately and targeted.
Thank you. Chris Clark.
Well, I'm very glad to see that there is a program that is in place to start to address this issue. But as an Aboriginal person, I see that, so many people from down south, or, so many non-Native people that are in positions of power within the federal or within the territorial public service, you don't see Native women in those levels of service. So we really need to work harder for that, and I'm glad that that's starting to occur. In Iceland in about the 1950s, they all women walked out on all jobs, and including paid jobs and jobs such as housework, and that really spawned them to be one of the most equitable societies for women in the world. And not that I want that to happen at this time, you know, because we really need people to keep working, but we shouldn't take that to force this issue for something to occur. So although yes, there's a program to help that, we really need to ensure that we're pushing that and make it happen. We really need to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Cam Lake, we're going to start with Kieran Testart.
This is a very good question. It's very important that we find more opportunities for women in public life and in the civil service and in professional careers in general. And we can't really have a discussion about how to support women, if we don't talk about childcare and affordable childcare options for women, especially for single parents. It's difficult for them to be able to find an equitable home life balance when they don't have those options available to them or when childcare is out of reach. So we have to look at universal childcare. We have to look at working in partnership with the federal government to create more daycare spaces. And we have to start looking at education opportunities as well. More scholarships and grant programs and law and public administration specifically targeted and available to women candidates. And also mentorship programs are great, and it is good to see that there are options currently available, and we should be expanding on those opportunities and making them readily available for women candidates within the public service. Thank you.
Thank you. David Ramsey.
Thanks very much. The fact that we don't have an Indigenous woman currently as Deputy Minister, I think that's an issue that we'll have to solve with the next government. We have to go into the workforce and identify young, up-and-coming Aboriginal women for leadership positions. We have to be able to have the training, and they have to be able to take education leave, things like that are going to prepare them for leadership roles within the government. And we have to support them. And I think it really all starts with, investments in education. We've recently made some really great improvements to our SFA program. We've got to get kids graduating from high school. We've got to get them out to colleges, universities, and get them back here working here in the Northwest Territories. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Frame Lake. We'll start with Jan Fullerton.
So when I first read this question, even though I have sat in the Status of Women Council for the last 2 years as the North Slave representative, my first reaction was not that it isn't an issue. I think it's very much an issue, but that I don't feel that I have a clear understanding of the barriers that are stopping women, Indigenous women, from becoming deputy ministers. Is it to do with systemic issues, as Kieran mentioned, with the daycare? Is it to do with how many women are applying? Is it women who are applying and they're not getting accepted because of conscious or unconscious discrimination? So to me, the first thing that we need to do is to do a little bit more inquiry into why we aren't actually seeing more women in these roles, because we need to first understand the barriers in order to overcome them. And how we get that information, I'm not sure. I don't know if our Department of Human Resources tracks information on applicants, just sort of statistical information on applicants that would show how many Indigenous women candidates have applied on these roles. But that would be the type of information that I think we should be starting with, is trying to find out exactly where things are going off the rails and then looking at how we get it back on track.
Thank you. David Waseltu.
You got it that time. Right off the bat, it's clear that more Indigenous women need to be represented in the civil service. At the same time, beyond that, frankly, all women need access to opportunities, and we need to create a civil service that's open and representative of our actual population. We haven't achieved that right now. Some things that we need to do is the GNWT HR department, frankly, has a lot of policies in place that would take on mentoring programs that would put Indigenous women in the right positions, but they're not enforced, and they don't actually take advantage of the policies they have today. This needs to happen. We need to expand the policies, but we also need to use what we already have and the tools available to us. The GNWT is by far the largest employer in the territory and needs to set an example for community governments and other organizations that employ Northerners in positions. By setting an example and by enacting sort of modern and representative HR policies, we can do that. Mentorship programs work well when frankly, both sides of it, the person who's mentoring and somebody who's learning the position, have that opportunity and are eager and excited to do it. We need to find the right positions and the right people to do this mentoring and to have these programs. It's important that we take those steps as we move into the next government and we look at changing deputy ministers and senior administrative roles. That culture needs to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Roy Erasmus.
Thank you. Yeah, this situation is kind of weird, particularly when you consider that more women are graduating than men. And it's not only Indigenous women, it's like that at the high school level as well as the post-secondary level. Also, we know that the GNWT is not representative of the people. The staff is not representative of the people that it represents. And the GNWT has been trying to do something about this for years, but the level of Indigenous staff has been stuck at around 33% for decades. So in the long term, affirmative action has to be properly implemented. And each department is supposed to have an affirmative action implementation plan, but last time I checked, most of them didn't have that. So we need to have plans in all of these departments that includes having women for senior management. We also need a section in HR whose sole job would be to implement and improve affirmative action, and part of that duty could be to get women into senior management. And in a short term, we can also identify several women and target them, move them up into senior management. That would include training them and include paid education leave. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kevin O'Reilly.
Thanks. First off, I guess I just want to draw the distinction between, like Glenn did, inside GNWT and a bigger conversation about women in politics, because I think that would be another whole question. But within GNWT, others have said that they should play a leadership role, and I think that by offering appropriate training, education, mentoring opportunities, that would certainly help. And one idea would be to ensure that where there are specific projects that a woman could lead, and you've got a choice between women and men, put a woman in charge and let them run the project and develop some capacity in that way. It's been shown, certainly in the business community and around the world, that gender diversity and having more women involved leads to competitive advantages, and we should certainly be following those sorts of leads. One of the things, though, that really does need to be addressed to ensure that women can start to assume leadership positions, even within government, is better childcare. We need to have affordable childcare, and we need to have flexible work schedules. With the new government in Ottawa, I think there's an opportunity to try to work on this. We've also got a report from within ECE about building a childcare system within the Northwest Territories. Lastly, Iceland, 1970s. We were in Iceland this summer. The women went on strike. Basically, for about 3 days, the country almost fell apart.
Thank you, candidates. We get to move on to another question here, and just once again, commendable job on sticking to a minute and a half. Election forums are exciting times for democracy, so let us continue. We're going to start into question number 2, which is a land claims question, and it reads, a number of unfinished land claims negotiations are long overdue for completion in the territory. What should the territorial government do to support the completion of unsettled land claims in the Northwest Territories? We're going to begin with Cam Lake Riding, David Ramsey.
Thanks very much. We have done a lot of work in, as I mentioned earlier, reestablishing relations with Aboriginal governments across the Northwest Territories. For us, it's very important that the 2 large outstanding claims get settled, the Decho and Akecho claim. 144,000 square kilometers of land, and if we are going to develop our resource base, if we are going to get jobs and opportunities for people, the sooner we settle the land claims, the better. There is some optimism with the change in government in Ottawa that we will be able to get these settled sooner rather than later. One of the things I was hoping to get accomplished during the life of the last government was the settlement of the Nahjo claim. We didn't quite get there. We were close, and hopefully early in the life of this government we will get a resolution to the Nahjo claim, and I can't understate the importance of us settling those claims, and we need to continue to work on that trust and respect with our Aboriginal partners here in the NWT, and we'll continue to make progress here in the NWT. Thank you.
Kieran Testart.
The importance of settling these claims can't be understated. It is the future to our economy, the future to our environment, the future to our society, and getting there is difficult because the relationship previously has not been always the best. We have an obligation to embrace reconciliation, to embrace all of the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, and to make that relationship a meaningful partnership with open and informed consent, and make those negotiations open and with all the cards on the table, and from a place of mutual respect, where we both see this as a nation-building process, where the NWT and Aboriginal nations and peoples are both moving to get forward together, and all governments are equally represented. I think a change in tone and bringing the right kind of political will that will respect both sides equally, respect the past, respect our shared history, and achieve results is the way forward. And there is a sea change in Ottawa, which will, I strongly believe, it will achieve results on the federal end. So now it's time for us to follow through with that process and work collaboratively and respect that shared history and respect reconciliation to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kieran. The next riding we get to move into is the Frame Lake riding, and we're going to begin with Roy Erasmus.
Thank you. I have been a director of negotiations at Aboriginal Affairs for several years, and I also was a negotiator for an Aboriginal claimant group. And during that time, I learned that we need to change the model. We have to get rid of the old federal model where the claimant group is the enemy, and they only meet once every month or every couple of months. And we need to use probably the Dene Nahjo model that was used recently. They compressed about 4 years of negotiations into 4 months. They were at a dead stop, and they negotiated an agreement within 4 months. What happened was the politicians took the process away from the negotiators, and the politicians were on call so that they could get political direction to the table immediately, rather than waiting until the next meeting, and sometimes even 2 meetings before they could get political direction. They also have to have more intense negotiations more quickly and set a time frame and live up to that time frame. They also have to have a more broad and flexible mandate than in the past, because in the past it's no, 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 until finally the Aboriginal claimant group has got so much money that they owe to the government, they finally cave in and they give up. So we need to use a collaborative approach and using how to get yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Next is Kevin O'Reilly, please.
Thanks, Amos. Just first off, we have to be really careful with terminology here. These are not land claims. This is about affirming Aboriginal rights and building relationships. So we just need to be really clear with our terminology. Like I think Roy said, we need to have more flexible negotiating mandates from the GNWT side in particular. I've talked to people both in the Nahjo processes and the Nahjo treaty entitlement, and flexible negotiating mandates are really required. Maybe even some changes in the composition of the GNWT teams would be helpful to try to start to move some things along. I also think that it's really important that this is not just a cabinet setting a mandate, that all MLAs need to be engaged and involved in setting the mandates. There needs to be regular reporting back to the MLAs of progress. And there needs to be some recognition that land rights and the way of recognizing those evolve over time. The Tlicho government were able to negotiate self-government as part of their arrangements. Some of the current negotiations are talking about co-ownership of lands and resources. We need to be able to recognize and embrace these new sorts of approaches. Not everybody can or should be fit into the old comprehensive claims model. Thanks.
Jan Fullerton.
Well, I certainly agree as well that this is something that is very important that we get settled. I think that until the issue of who has authority over land has been determined, that it really stands in the way of us moving forward on a lot of things in the Northwest Territories. As far as the role of the territorial government, I don't have a strong background in this area. It's something that I'm trying to learn more about. I do think that it's important that we advocate to the federal government to help move this forward more quickly. And like Kieran, I hope that the new government that we have in Ottawa and the fact that we have 3 Liberal MPs in the north will help us to accelerate some of this process, and that there'll be more reception to a quick resolution to the land claims.
Thank you, Jan. And David Wasatsu.
Of course, you're trying though. So of course the Akecho and the Decho land claim need to be settled, and it's really important that we get these things settled. The GNWT has a very important role at the table and significant capacity to deal with it. You know, a new government here and a new government in Ottawa is important, and we need to listen to our negotiating partners and build a partnership-based approach to handling the land claims. With the new federal environment and with this changes in attitude that seems to be coming, we need a review, frankly, of the GNWT's negotiating both policies and functions. We need to make sure that we're resourcing it properly, that we have the right people at the table, and that we have the right mandates set. Our mandates are ongoing mandates, unlike the federal mandates, which only exist for the term of government. So we have to do a review of that functionality in the government. It's in everyone's best interest to get these agreements settled. Frankly, it shouldn't take a generation to settle these land claims. These are things that we can accomplish, and we should be accomplishing and working on them. The GNWT should do more than just reporting to the House. They should be reporting regularly to the public on the progress of negotiations. It shouldn't be a mystery. There shouldn't be any black box to this. It should be something that's discussed, and we know where we stand, and the public is fully engaged in that process. Thank you.
Just a heads up, we're going to take a break after the next 2 ridings. Next up is the Great Slave Lake riding with Chris, please.
Thank you. So this issue isn't just about the land claims, but it's just about treaty rights, and these are our treaty rights. My great-grandma, Mary Louise King, was born in the year 1901 and at the signing of Treaty 8 for her grandfather, who I guess is my great-great-grandfather, Chief Snuff. And, you know, this is still continuing to this day. We're still trying to resolve this issue. That's 115 years ago. That's ridiculous. You know, trust is a huge issue, and for good reason. The government has always made it difficult for Aboriginal groups to trust them, and I think that continues to this day. So we really have to look at trying to improve relationships with First Nations as an elected official, and really listen and understand what they need and what they want. And, you know, in terms of what they need is that it needs to be given to them. So I think that 115 years is long overdue, and it's really important that we conclude these things as soon as possible. We need to honor our treaties, and we need to work closely with local governments. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn Abernathy, please.
Thank you. I agree with everybody at the table. We need to conclude these negotiations. We need to conclude them in a meaningful and respectful way. We do know that the current model for these negotiations that's in place really doesn't work. It's been taking years, and we haven't made much progress in either the Decho or the Kecho. But we do know that by doing things a little bit differently, we can make progress. And if you look at Dene as a model, but also the Dene self-government negotiations that were completed in a really reasonable time, we know we can do things differently. So my suggestion would be that the 18th Legislative Assembly must make concluding these negotiations a critical component of their mandate. Once selected, the members need to direct Cabinet to immediately meet with the CAHO and the DECHO to talk about a new way of doing business, a new way of moving forward together in a collaborative way to conclude these negotiations, and they must do it together. And like Kevin, this needs to be reported back to the members on a regular basis and the public at milestones. But this can happen, this should happen, this must happen. So I would strongly encourage the next government to meet with these organizations, these Aboriginal governments, early in the life of the next government, set up a plan, and get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Abernathy. Range Lake Riding, Daryl Delaney.
Great, thank you, Amos. And, you know, I do agree with everyone that has spoken to this here. And these unsettled land claims, unfortunately, are really preventing us from unlocking our true potential in Northwest Territories, and that's just unfortunate given the circumstances. The question does ask, what should we be doing as a government? And I think first and foremost, not walking away from the table is probably a good start. You know, as we heard, respect and trust these are the key pillars to which I believe the current format is disallowing resolution to come forward. When you look at what's currently on the table, it's coming down to three key areas, such as land quantum, surface and subsurface rights. So there should be some resolve coming forward. This is not a very difficult thing. We're making it difficult by not being a partner to it. And as you heard earlier, there's an issue where it's the cabinet that seems to take a leadership role in this. And one of the fundamental flaws of our government consensus is that regular members are not even observers to the process. We are after the fact, we're actually given briefings as to what actually occurred. And I think that's a fault in our system. And if we're truly going to find consensus and find resolve to land claims, I think all members, all elected members of the 18th Assembly should have some role, whether it's observer or supporting role, to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the people in need. So I'm strongly encouraging those elected in the 18th Assembly, we've got to do things a little differently to make this thing work. Thank you.
And lastly, Caroline Cochran.
Hi, I agree with everyone at the table that the land claims needs to be settled. The territorial government needs to advocate to the federal government to complete the outstanding land claim negotiations. This is critical both in assisting Indigenous people to begin the healing process necessary to succeed and flourish, as well as alleviating the confusion that mineral exploration companies have in negotiating land use. Now that devolution is here, NWT residents expect a Made in the North solution versus a Made in Ottawa solution, and I'm really hopeful that the new federal government will bring a positive solution-based approach to the table. As well as though the land claims, it's really important that we support self-governments. Indigenous people have the answers for their own issues. The GNWT then needs to be available for consultation when requested, and yet not attempt to force their beliefs and policies in the defining of Indigenous self-governance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We are going to take a 5-minute break here. Starting now, I will continue talking for a second. We do have drinks over there and some snacks. For our online listeners, we will reconvene in about 5 minutes on our live streaming site with some more questions from us, our pre-designed questions, and then over to the Q&A section before we call it an evening. So thank you.
everyone. If we could start moving back to our seats, we can get going here. We're going to have a couple more questions posed by ourselves, the moderators, and then we're going to open up the mic to questions from the audience. And we do have a few questions that have been given to us that have been written down and submitted in the back. So we'll be doing it that way. So if you could take your seats, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
So for those of you that are wondering, we are planning to get started here in the next couple of seconds, but I just wanted to explain our format. So we did have up to 15 questions pre-submitted to this panel, but we are not going to get to all of them. So what we have tried to do is eliminate the ones that are very similar in themes so that we're not repeating similar issues. And we're going to try to get through a couple more up until about 8:15, and from that point we will open the floor to a Q&A from our audience and online. Also online, we were back in action. I'm going to hand it over to moderator Megan.
All right, thanks everybody. Thanks, Lauren, for the tea. All right, we're going to start with a question about the economy. The economy of the Northwest Territories has historically been dependent on non-renewable resource extraction, making us vulnerable to boom and bust cycles characteristic of oil, gas, and mining activities. What strategies do you suggest for economic diversification in the North? And we're going to begin in Frame Lake with Kevin O'Reilly.
Thanks, Megan. Well, this one's near and dear to my heart. So there's a lot of information about my thoughts on this in terms of economic diversification in my platform. I think one of the best ways we can start to diversify our economy is investing more into renewable resources and renewable energy in particular. Investment in renewables always creates more jobs than in traditional oil and gas in particular, and even mining. Renewable energy also has the potential to reduce the cost of living here in Yellowknife, and that's something that I'm hearing at the door when I go around the riding. As an example, we put in a wood pellet boiler ourselves this past summer, and it's cut our heating costs in half. Arctic Energy Alliance does provide some assistance, but the money runs out very quickly into the year. We could also look, I think, at rejuvenating the Great Slave Lake fishery. We've never reached the commercial harvest quotas there, and it would also help improve food security and develop an export market by doing that work. Local food production is something that's an ongoing issue here in Yellowknife. We've got good community gardening started. but we should be investing a lot more there to build food security in the north. Cold weather technology, I think, is an area that we could certainly look at. And then I think we need to look at how we can get a campus here in Yellowknife.
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to stop, Kevin.
Thank you.
Jan Fullerton, thanks.
So one of the things, I currently have sit on the Cleacho Regional Training Partnership Committee, which looks at training and development in the Cleacho region. And one of the things that they're looking at doing, which I think we should be looking at for all of the NWT, is developing community economic development plans that are driven at the community level, much like the wellness plans that were developed through Health and Social Services within the last few years. And I think that needs to be done in conjunction with umbrella strategies for all of the territories for how we can have some things move forward. There may be supports that are needed to deliver certain initiatives at the community level, but I think that communities are in the best position to identify what gaps in services are in their communities and also what capacity they have in their communities to be expanding and doing new opportunities, whether it's ecotourism or whether it's guiding and outfitting or whether it's traditional arts and crafts or whether it's something dramatically different. So related to that, Aurora College over the last number of years has had their Northern Adult Basic Education that have embedded literacy and essential skills, and within that they've had entrepreneurship courses that have been very successful. They've had very good turnouts, and the people who have participated in those courses have been moving forward with what they've learned. And I also think we need to look at whether there's administrative or sort of legislative barriers to economic diversification as far as red tape or anything like that, or the paperwork that might be needed for people to start small businesses in small communities.
Thank you. David Waseltsu.
There we go, the button helps. The northern economy is very boom and bust. I mean, we have, frankly, a lot of jobs in the economy, in the government, in the resource sector, and the service sector. All of these things are interlinked, and they're going to be going forward. One of the things that we can do is take advantage of some of the opportunities we have. The GNWT is, frankly, one of the largest clients for almost every sector in the Northwest Territories. And right now, we have a business incentive policy that helps on a cost basis, but what it doesn't do is take into account community benefits for some of the contracting that we're doing. The government has the ability to spend money in ways that will help develop the small business sector in the north. One such industry is the IT industry. Right now, we spend millions of dollars a year and money that goes to Alberta, BC, or consulting companies around the world, instead of trying to develop a sector and people who work in that field in the north. We have the Mackenzie Valley Fiber Line that we spent $80 million plus on, and it's not a sector that we're paying attention to. We're spending money in it, but it's not here. So we need to build the capacity to build small businesses in the north and build industries for the services that we're already purchasing. If we're spending the money already, we may as well be spending it locally and building capacity locally. That's a huge part of something that GNWT can directly do today to start building these businesses. Second to that, we have to find ways to replace the jobs with high-paying jobs. That's one example of a sector where the jobs are 80 to 100K a year. We need high-paying jobs, not just replacing jobs with, frankly, low-paying jobs. We need things that give people the affordability to be able to stay in the north and be able to live here and make it their home. Thank you.
Thank you. Roy Erasmus.
Thank you. Small businesses drive our economy and need more support from the GNWT. For instance, as we've heard David say, the GNWT spends millions of dollars every year on information technology programs and services from the south. And our small businesses here could have easily provided those services and programs, and they should. And so really the GNWT could have created a really good industry in the north that could compete worldwide. Also, the GNWT's regulations, the laws, the policies, they often create barriers and hurdles to the growth of our small businesses. They need to be reviewed so that this no longer happens. And we also have to try to keep people doing things that they like to do. This means providing a much greater assistance with smaller scale economic activity. We also need to invest more in sustainable renewable resources like the fishing, agriculture, and renewable energy. I already mentioned that I'd like to see the fisheries established much better, and especially the Great Slave Lake fishery It's, I don't know why, but we seem to be going to the south to bring people, fishermen here to fish our fish when they should be developing the northern industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Cam Lake. We'll start with Kieran to start.
One of the big issues is not so much the boom and bust cycle, it's how, or the importance of natural resources, it's how we're managing our natural resources. The Heritage Fund could be a very strong tool for creating future prosperity that benefits Northerners over time, but we're only investing a tiny amount of money in it. And my plan, we invest 100% of our resource revenues into the Heritage Fund so we can get larger dividends that can pay for our infrastructure needs and other benefits to Northerners going ahead. The strongest investment we can make in our economy today, supporting Northerners in their local economies, the people who've been here working hard for a long time. I would like to cut the small business tax rate by 1% and make the Northwest Territories the most tax competitive jurisdiction in Canada's north for business investment, and invest 1.2 million in entrepreneurs and small businesses to give them resources to grow their businesses and develop more opportunities for themselves. I would also like to see the introduction of a business investment tax credit that would shield investors from, or protect investors and take the liability off investing in northern businesses to allow them to grow into larger companies. And also introduce a research and development tax credit to make use of northern innovation and unique research opportunities up here. Those changing the foundation of how our territory works and creating a foundation of investment and private sector ingenuity is what we need. Thank you.
Thank you. David Ramsey.
Yes, thank you very much. We have a strategy called the Economic Opportunity Strategy. Early in the life of the 17th Assembly, we understood that we can't rest all of our laurels on resource extraction. It was important to look at how we can diversify the economy here in the Northwest Territories, and it's been hugely successful. We've seen some big increases in agriculture. We've started the Northern Farm Training Institute in Hay River. On the tourism side, Yellowknife was recently recognized as the fastest growing tourism destination in Canada. On the commercial fishery, we have a marketing subsidy for fishermen. We have earmarked $1.5 million for a new fish plant in Hay River. We're looking for a partner in Ottawa. We didn't get too far with the last government. We're hoping with the change in government in Ottawa, we will be successful in getting a partner. We need $5 million to build that fish plant, so that's important that moves forward. We're going to continue to implement the recommendations contained in the Economic Opportunity Strategy. We've got money in there for a convention bureau. It's been very successful here in Yellowknife, and also looks at opportunities outside of Yellowknife, regional tourism dollars, and also before my time runs out, I can't underscore the importance of Yellowknife and the Northwest Territories trying to get a university here. If you want to diversify the economy, let's focus our efforts on getting a university here in Yellowknife, and all the research dollars, all the students that will come to Yellowknife to look at things like mining and Aurora. Thank you.
Thanks. Over to Great Slave District now. We'll start with Glenn Abernathy. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is an important question. I mean, ultimately, we need to continue to pursue socially and environmentally responsible resource extraction because that brings in the large dollars. But we also need to focus on a diversified economy here in the Northwest Territories to ensure that we're circulating those dollars as many times as we can here in the Northwest Territories and providing real opportunities for employment. I like what I've heard across the table. I agree fully that we need to work on an agricultural strategy here in the Northwest Territories to find ways to support the agricultural industry here in the Northwest Territories, which also goes to cost of living. As food will be produced locally and available to our residents. Fisheries is the same. We need to continue to work on the fisheries strategy that Mr. Ramsey was talking about to ensure that we are maximizing the number of fish that we can responsibly take out of our waters to market both internally in the Northwest Territories but externally outside of the Northwest Territories to create real economies. We also need to pursue opportunities around the arts and culture. This is a huge opportunity to create different levels of economy, and we need to spend more time focused on film, arts, and other things. We also have a college here in the Northwest Territories, and one thing that I think we really need to do is to take that college, look at the programs and services that they're delivering, ensure that they're providing training that is actually going to be utilized here in the Northwest Territories. So we need to train Northerners for Northern work, and we need to rethink how we're delivering programs at the college.
Thank you. Chris Clark.
Thanks. So, first of all, I think this starts off to some degree with education, and we need to ensure that, you know, the government of Northwest Territories does a good job at educating educating Northerners. But what happens when they come home? There are oftentimes jobs that are taken by non-Northerners within, you know, specific industries and specifically within the government, and then there are, you know, a lack of jobs in a lot of regions, such as some of the smaller communities in the north and throughout the north. So, you know, we're lucky here in my riding of Great Slave that we live in Yellowknife, which is such a flourishing community. But even then, there are a lot of people that are struggling to make ends meet here because of the high cost of living. So I think that we really need to look at, obviously, replenishable industries. We've talked about fisheries, maybe, you know, off the Arctic Ocean coast or within Great Bear Lake or Great Slave Lake, which can contribute to those communities' prosperity. We also need to look for assistance for small businesses to help our economy flourish. But we have to look for also like longer lasting opportunities for jobs, like fisheries, forestry that's replenishable, maybe in the south, you know, near the border of Alberta with the NWT. In Fort Smith, there was a logging company there that went under because they didn't have a kiln to dry the wood. So, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Range Lake, finally, we'll have Caroline Cochran begin.
Okay, to start now. So the NWT has the poorest 20% and the richest 20% of households within the country. This tells us that an economy based on extractive industries is making our communities more unequal, and inequality hurts us all. Money is leaking from our communities due to a lack of business opportunities and non-local spending. So the answers. The people have the answers, and it's time to start listening. That's one of the reasons I'm running. In 2014, Bob Bromley and Dennis Bevington conducted a survey on building sustainable localized communities. It was released in March of 2015 of this year. Within the survey, people talked about alternative energy, solar, wind, biomass, etc. They talked about renewable resources, fisheries, and forestry. They talked about manufacturing. They talked about tourism, ecotourism, and increasing the promotion of our arts and crafts. And they talked about local food production. Each one of these ideas provides for community empowerment, sustainable economic development opportunities, as well as present greener alternatives to our current reliance on fossil fuels. Each idea brings us more in harmony with the natural environment, and it's time to start listening to what the people say. Thank you.
Thank you. Daryl Delaney, you can take your mic back.
Thank you. We're hoping that devolution will unlock some of these doors to prosperity that we continue to hear, but we can't negate the need to increase our investment and support in the mineral incentive programs, which are dire need. So as for renewable opportunities to the question, and aside from what you've heard from investments we can do in biomass and wind and solar, we've heard that the Mackenzie Valley fiber optic link is going to be coming online very soon, and I believe this is one of the largest opportunities to expand our capacity in Nunavik on a global market with our satellites that could come on stream. So we also need to increase and support and target our investments, as you heard in our economic opportunity strategy. It's a great strategy. However, we fought very hard to try to put the needed money into it. And we need to continue strong investments in tourism. We all know that NWT is a world tourism destination, but we always fight tooth and claw to get more money in the communities so they can promote tourism in the regions. As well, I think there's a huge opportunity in the Convention Bureau, and I think it has a lot of opportunity in our other smaller communities as well. We have also, as you heard, in opportunities in agriculture, food networks, farmers associations, community gardens, and green tells technology. This will not only help our economy, but it will also lower our cost of living. And finally, I think there's a potential at the Tallston Hydro facility to sell the excess 9 megawatts of power that spills over every day. And this investment is a site for one of the bigger projects of my overall energy plan. If you want to hear more, talk to me later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to have one more question asked by us, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. Thank you very much for your patience.
The last one from us is on the education theme. The question reads, elders and educators across the territory have identified a need for more land-based education. What can the territorial government do to increase support for land-based learning at all levels of schooling? We will begin with the Range Lake riding. Daryl Delaney.
Thank you, Amos. This is a great topic. Having had the opportunity to witness firsthand, I've seen where land-based education has been extremely successful. Many jurisdictions worldwide are leap years ahead of Canada and GNWT as a whole. Countries like the Polynesian Islands and New Zealand with the Maori and also Australia. So we have the ability to learn from their actions, and they have some great success stories. They've got great success rates in graduation, and when you talk to the experts there, they have the stats to tell you that when people go through the land-based education system, by the time they reach middle school or near high school, they're at the same level as the public system, which is amazing. And having the ability to talk to one of the students of these land-based education, I said, so what do you do? Do you guys, do you skip school? And she looked at me funny, and she said, you know what, I don't know what you mean. And yet here in the territories, we deal with truancy rates that are unsurmountable. So I think we've got lots to learn about land-based education, and I think this is an opportunity to preserve our language and culture. We've heard recently that Colville Lake has asked to put this as a pilot, and if elected, I can tell you right now, I'll strongly encourage supporting that. Thank you.
Caroline Cochran, please.
Okay, it's working. So education is critical. It's critical for assisting people to prosper, it's critical for protecting our land, and it's critical for preserving our culture. However, Northern education must reflect the needs of Northern people. With over 50% of our population being Indigenous, education within the NWT must include traditional knowledge. We've made some progress within this with the increased funding for elders within our schools, professional development opportunities for our teachers using local community resources, but we still have a long way to go. So I would support a full review of the legislation regarding land-based education within the K-12 programming as well as post-secondary education. I also support working in partnership with the Indigenous bands and organizations such as the Shenta Center for Research and Learning, which offers accredited courses provided by Northern leaders, experts, and elders. We need to work in partnership to make Aboriginal knowledge work. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. We are going to move into the Frame Lake riding, beginning with Mr. David Waseltsu.
First off, I'd like to say, the programs in K-12 education today are great. They're not enough, but they're great. It's, as a parent, it's funny, you talk to other parents and teachers and everything else, and they're the classes and the days and the trips that people want to go in on. There's a list of parents that want to go along for the trips as far as my arm. This is the kind of thing that we need to expand on. We need to have community and parent involvement in this in the programming at the K-12 level. We have some great programs that need to be enhanced. Right now, they're not consistent throughout the schools. Different schools do different degrees of land-based education. This needs to be a basic part of the curriculum and spread out at all of the schools doing the same level of it. It's very important to the entire population of the NWT to be able to do that. We need to increase that part. We need to have it further integrated into the K-12 curriculum. This is a basic piece of the curriculum advancement. At the same time, we need to fund the programming for all students. Right now, it's not always funded for all students. It's sometimes funded even as part of the basic school funding, and this needs to be expanded so that there's guaranteed continuous funding for land-based education in schools. At the same time, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from groups like Deshinta. Deshinta does some amazing programming now. This needs to be expanded at the same time, or our college needs to learn some lessons from that. There's some great lessons to be learned of ways of educating in post-secondary and adults in this programming, and sometimes it seems like those lessons aren't being taken to heart by our other educational facilities, so we need to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Roy Erasmus, please.
Thank you. Well, I was the Assistant Deputy Minister of Education for 4 years, so I can tell you that one of the biggest things that we would have to do is to provide more funding, because on-the-land programs would not be cheap. And we're hearing here that educators are calling for more land-based education, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the school boards are in agreement with this. So ECE would have to work with the school boards to get them on side, and that means to work collaboratively, not to jam things down their throats. Like, seems like some things have been going on, like the junior kindergarten, for instance. And we already have in existence some land-based programming here, the Deshinta University. They've been in existence for quite a while. Their programs are well established, and we have them as a model. We could look at how they do things so that we can offer them to the younger grades as well. I'm also told that they offer schooling to young people when their mothers are there. They bring their children, and it's very successful. You have no problem there. If you're on the land, you're not going to be running around all night and not making it to school. Working this way, you could also get people straight into Deshinta. Thank you.
Kevin O'Reilly.
Thanks, Amos. I guess to start with, I agree with David that we can't just look at the grade 10 Northern Studies course as the way to teach our students about the North and what it offers. And living here, even as non-Aboriginal peoples, there's a lot to learn from our Aboriginal neighbors. So we have to take a much more integrated approach to on-the-land programs and get them throughout the school curriculum. We don't, sorry, Daryl, we don't have to go to Polynesia to find this out. We got some great programs even here in Yellowknife. The Birch Grove, if you've been out there, it's a great way for kids to get out on the land, and Yellowknife's Dene First Nation elders are there as well. Bobby Dry Geese has a great camp over near Detta. We need to take advantage of the local opportunities that are already there and just start to integrate these more into what happens with our kids. I want to mention too Deshinta Bush University. I did meet with folks there. They have a good business plan that they've already developed, and I think GNWT needs to be investing in this as a good example of how to integrate science and on-the-land programs so that students can actually stay in the North, learn in the North, and if we can expand this, build a university program and research capacity in the North. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Jan Fullerton, please.
So in my role with Skills Canada over the last couple of years, I've been able to be at the table for some of the work they've been doing around educational renewal, and I think that a lot of that change lends itself well to this discussion. Specifically, they're talking about a move towards more competency-based education where you have embedded essential skills. So rather than teaching children how to memorize facts and figures that they can easily find on the internet in today's world, instead it's more about transferable skills. It's more about critical thinking. It's more about the ability to find their own answers. And I think that that gives a lot more flexibility to explore land-based education because you're not locked into the classroom model of learning where everything is about sort of basic math and stuff. Now that stuff also needs to be taught, but it can be taught in an embedded manner while they're out on the land doing education that way. I think the other thing that's important to keep maintained through the process of exploring more land-based education is that we still want to make sure that any students who wish to go to traditional universities moving forward or other forms of post-secondary education, that they still have that alignment and they still have whatever credentials they might need to be able to go on that way. So I think that's all part of what we need to be looking at, but I think it's wonderful what's being explored with the education renewal program as far as having more competency-based education.
Okay, moving over to Great Slave Lake. Mr. Chris Clark, you're up next.
Hi, so I myself went to university for 8 years and had a master's degree in architecture and Bachelor of Science, and obviously I think that education is extremely important, but I think that it really starts, you know, from a very young age, and I think that we really need to get our elders involved in the education, not only on the land, but also in the classroom, and perhaps starting in you know, within childcare. I think that education solves many problems, social and economic. So I think that if we can maybe amalgamate seniors' residences with day homes or daycares, that, you know, there could be stuff that is taught to children from a very young age that they're going to need to understand culturally, language, and whatnot for the land programs. And then there's some programs that are such as the Dene Nahjo program, which is an academic program from K to 12 to teach on the land based stuff. But also, you know, we need to bring the outside in, and we need to have traditional knowledge within the classrooms so that we can be prepared for on the land programs as well. Thank you.
Glenn Abernathy, please.
Thank you. I really appreciate everything that I've heard from the table today, and I got to say my favorite answer so far is Carolyn Cochran-Johnson's, and I'd like to actually build a little bit upon what she was talking about. I agree that we need to do more with land-based education for all levels, and right now education is the one that's often tasked with that. But we all know we're in a fiscal reality, a very tight fiscal reality here in the Northwest Territories, so we have to be smarter with our money. We have to be smarter with the way we're spending our money. And right now, I know the Department of Justice has money in their budget to do on-the-land programming for youth throughout the Northwest Territories. I know Health and Social Services is providing money to the Aboriginal community throughout the Northwest Territories for on-the-land programming. I know that education's got the same. And often they're competing for time, they're competing for volunteers, they're competing for other individuals. We actually have to find a way to work with the school boards, work with the Aboriginal government throughout the Northwest Territories, and think about how we're spending those dollars so that we can get more benefit from those dollars, so that we can have longer programs rather than a bunch of short programs where we're duplicating some of the work we're doing, and expand those programs. I think there's a real opportunity here to break down some of the silos in government to get those benefits. I've had an opportunity to go some of the on-land programs that are here in the Northwest Territories, and the smiles on the kids' faces, it's heartwarming, and we need to do more. And I think working together with our partners and with our departments, we could actually make a more significant impact into this particular area. Thank you.
Up next is Cam Lake Riding. We'll begin with David Ramsey.
Thanks very much, Amos. Yeah, I know my son's in grade 3, and he's pretty excited about going out to a rabbit camp where they teach the kids how to snare, and they have some rabbit stew, and traditional practices are explained to the children. So I know some of this is happening here in Yellowknife. We have had some huge success. Thousands of children across the Northwest Territories have taken part in our Take a Kid trapping and Take a Kid harvesting programs that we've had. These are well-recognized programs that we have available to children throughout the Northwest Territories. I also want to put a plug in for Dechinta Bush University, as well as the work that they're doing. And it is very important that the government of the Northwest Territories supports the effort that Dechinta provides. And also, I'll get back to what a university would mean to the economy here in the Northwest Territories, and the fact that we could and should be having this type of research happen here in the Northwest Territories in the area of permafrost, climate change, geology, a number of areas. There's no reason why that couldn't happen here with the establishment of a permanent university north of 60, and it should be in Yellowknife. Thank you.
Kieran Testart, please.
My son brought home muskrat for me to eat a little while ago, and it was an experience. But I've learned that over the years of living here and speaking to Aboriginal people that for many Indigenous people, land is life. And when we're talking about on-the-land education, it's important for not only student achievement, but for promoting cultural security. We need to work with Indigenous governments and communities to make sure these programs are adequately supported through primary and secondary schools. And Dechinta, again, is a fantastic model of how we can make this work on an academic context. And it needs funding. It needs to be able to access GNWT funding. And I support making changes, or I would make changes to the legislation to allow Dechinta to get its fair share of funding. And we can properly support this great Made in the North academic institution. And I think before we talk about a Northern University, which should always be our end goal, we need to think, we need to walk before we run. That's a huge investment in capacity, infrastructure, and money. And as we all know, we don't have unlimited resources. I have a plan, a 10-year plan, to put Aurora College on the path to a functional polytechnic where students can stay in the North and learn a trade and join the labor force here. This is an achievable plan. We can get it started right away and start moving towards real post-secondary achievement and opportunities for Northerners by following through with this plan. Thank you.
And thank you so much to all the candidates for answering those really tough, big questions. We're going to open it up to the floor now for questions. You can introduce yourself. That would be great. You can specify who the question's for if you want to ask all the candidates, or if you want to direct it just at a specific riding. Make sure to keep your preamble to a minimum and make sure that there's an actual question in there, because if there isn't, I'm going to ask you what your question is. And let's keep our tone really respectful here tonight. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm still not holding it right. I need some holding training, please. All right. You did great. Hi, I'm Mark Bogan, and this is for all candidates. After 23 years of family division litigation within 3 jurisdictions, it is still considered best practice and within the best interest of children to not know where the mothers live, not know where the children live, to die without really nurturing the children. People like me, family like mine, have never been proven to be unfit by a court of law. Policy stemming from the United Nations points to family genocide. This legacy began with Minister Kakfu's introduction to no-fault divorce. This legacy continues to date, where the GNWT gives family genocide no value. If elected, will you change this culture, form a joint committee, plus send recommendations to Ottawa? In the interest of public participation, a simple yes or no will do. Thank you.
Did everybody catch that? It was quite quick. Would you mind paraphrasing the last part of your question just once more, so that
Okay.
if they didn't have time to write that down, they...
We've never been proven to be unfit by a court of law. Policy stemming from the United Nations points to family genocide. This legacy began with Minister Kakfu's introduction to no-fault divorce and continues today, where the GNWT gives family genocide no value. If elected, will you form a joint committee and send your recommendations to Ottawa, yes or no?
I guess I'll start there. Yes, I would want to start a joint committee and ensure that that children are remaining with their family, whether it be with their immediate family or with their extended family. I think that removing children and completely removing them from their their community, then their regions, and the culture altogether is just disastrous for them. And I think we need to have more programs in place to make this happen. People that are struggling and maybe have addiction problems are more inclined, because they don't have money and they're stressed out, to drink or whatever. And they're getting $800 a month for raising 3 kids. Might be a single mother or something. But somebody take them away and they get $800 a kid per kid for a foster family. So I think that the mother in the first place maybe wouldn't have that couldn't have happened if we had different programs in place from the start and put money into different locations. Thank you.
Yeah, Glenn Abernathy can go next, and then we're just going to kind of head down the table, Frame Lake, Range Lake, and then head back to Cam Lake after that.
Okay, I think there's two conversations going on. I think Mr. Clark is talking more about the Child and Family Services and the need to support families to ensure that we keep kids in their homes and their communities and build up families and give them the tools they need. We've moved forward with Building Stronger Families, which is a new take on Child and Family Services, and we're moving that in that exact direction to find ways to keep children at home. We've also seen the apprehension rates in child protection drop significantly over the last couple of years. But there's a long way to go. I think Mark is talking more around family law. And I mean, I think we've all heard a number of concerns around family law and divorce and the process of divorce throughout the country, including in Canada, in Northwest Territories. We've put in a mediation program here in the Northwest Territories to encourage parents to work together in the best interest of their children in the cases of divorce. But it doesn't always work. Sometimes it does end up in courts. At which big point it becomes a significant battle. I think it's worth having this government look into family law and its impacts on its residents here in the Northwest Territories, recognizing that family law is a responsibility of the federal government. We would need, and I believe would be some value in working with the federal government to see if there's an opportunity to amend and change how family law is done with a focus on supporting children and allowing people, mothers and fathers, access to the children where there's no risk of harm or abuse. I think there's an opportunity there to work with the federal government. I think the federal government might be open to that. Thank you.
We were going to go to Frame Lake next, so Roy Erasmus.
Thank you. Mark, I'm assuming you're talking about when two parents separate and there's children involved. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would have to look into that. I'm not that familiar with that, but I do know that no-fault divorce is common across Canada. So it's not only in the NWT. So it's something that is a federal thing, and it goes right across Canada. And I would certainly be willing to look into it to see if I would do what you had asked. Thank you. That joint committee.
Thank you. Jan Fullerton.
I'm certainly open to exploring it. I'm not sure if I fully understand who might be part of a joint committee and so on. I do think, though, that it's worth exploring how our legal framework balances the rights of both fathers and mothers. And I think that's part of where you're coming from and what you want to have explored. I know other people have gone through the divorce system and had better outcomes than you have as far as fathers' rights. However, and I don't know about your situation, I just mean I know people who have had reasonable outcomes and the outcome that they were desiring. However, I'm certainly open to looking at how this system is structured to make sure that that happens more consistently.
Thank you. Kevin O'Reilly.
Thanks. First off, I guess I want to thank Glenn for a comprehensive answer, because I know Glenn has done a lot of thinking about this. So, Mark, I'm not sure I actually understand what you're asking for, but well, a joint committee, but with whom and where does it report to and so on. We can have that conversation outside, but so I can't say that I support what you're proposing. Looking at family law and how to keep families together, yeah, that's something I'm interested in doing some work on, but I do appreciate Glenn's response, and I think it's an appropriate one. Thanks.
Thank you. David Waseltsu.
Thanks for the question, Mark. As we've heard down the table, I mean, family law is a federal responsibility, but the GNWT's done some neat things. The mediation program that we have at the moment isn't a bad program. I mean, heck, I use the program, and I know a lot of friends who have been through the mediation process, and it's worked out favorably. It doesn't always. And sometimes, obviously, processes go further. It's something we should continue to explore. We should also add some sort of follow-up to it. I mean, having, frankly, been through some of this program, we don't do a lot of follow-up with families, and so we have to make sure that family situations in the North are happening. We have to make sure we have healthy families and make sure that the legal environment and that the child environment in the North leads to that positive outcomes for families and kids. It'll grow our communities, and it'll keep the North stable and growing. So, you know, I definitely look into the family law situation and realities here, but as far as the joint committee piece, it's a little undefined still, but look at it.
Thank you. Caroline Cochran.
Okay, thank you, Mark, again, for your question. I, again, don't have much history on your story, so I'm going to try to interpret as best I can. At this point, I wouldn't agree to a joint committee because I think the whole system is out of whack. I've been in the field for over 20 years, and I've gone to many AGMs in health and social services, and I've asked why the number of Indigenous children that are permanently removed is not going down, and I've never got a proper answer. In my opinion, our current provision of family support within the GNWT reminds me of residential school, in that the services are provided by a patriarchal government, and direct support is often provided by really well-meaning Caucasian people who have little knowledge of our history, our beliefs, and our culture. It's often those people who determine if and how our children will be able to remain in our homes. In my opinion, only when Indigenous people have self-government will this be addressed. Indigenous people need to be allowed to take care of Indigenous children, and I'm going to quit at that, sorry. That's it.
Thank you very much. Daryl Delaney.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for the question. And Mark, you know, we've talked about this many times here. You're a strong advocate regarding for equal parenting, and I commend you for it. But what you're asking here is to deviate from what is a federal responsibility here and try to create a committee that will have an overtone to the federal initiatives. Now, I'm not against the formation of a committee, as your question states. I do think there's some merit in finding better ways to cope with mediation if there's issues. So if there's policy developments around that, I'd be more inclined to have that discussion with Child and Family Services in opportunity. But as I said, this here is a federal statute, and I believe that you're asking about equal parenting policy, which I believe we could have some enhancements to make things better for the child and the parents involved. So in that respect, I'll answer in that capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. David Ramsey in Cam Lake.
Yes, thank you, and thanks, Mark, for the question. We always have to have what is in the best interest of the children at heart when we're discussing issues like this. I know others have mentioned the mediation process that we have. It's a free service to families that are going through a breakdown, and it's something I would encourage folks to take advantage of. It's a great program. Our legislature several years ago, and Mark would know this, we passed a motion. I believe it's the only motion that was passed in any legislature in Canada toward equal shared parenting. And my belief is that we're discussing children like this should have both their mother and their father in their lives wherever possible. And it's certainly something I've supported in the past and something I continue to support. And you know, as far as the establishment of a review committee with recommendations that could go to the federal government, that's something, Mark, that I think we should explore in the next government. And I want to thank you for your question. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Kieran Testart.
Well, I do think that in our family law system, the needs of the child always have to come first. It's an unfortunate situation for some families when they do break down, but not always. And we have to remember that there's personal choice involved between partners. And as long as both parents are equally responsible for the decision they're making, then they should have equal access to the child. But we need to ensure that the core of our family law system is putting the needs of the child first. They are the vulnerable party. And I don't think we need an overhaul of our family law system. And I don't think the situation as you describe it is reflected in the reality of the law. And I think we have good programs here. We have mediation programs to assist the federal, how the law works federally. And as long as that law stands in support of the needs of the children first, then it is working accordingly. And we all need to come together and do the best things for our families and the best thing for our children. And we need to support programming that allows us to do that. And that, in often cases, is getting to the root cause of people who are struggling to care for their children. And it's a very systemic issue, but I do not believe that the family law system is to blame. Thank you.
Thank you. We actually have a question over Twitter from Celine Antoine in Lidley. And it's about the Liberal government committing $300 million for a youth strategy. And she wants to know how can the Northwest Territories commit in a similar fashion to helping our youth? So I forgot to pick this. We'll start in Range Lake. Let's start with Caroline.
Okay, so I'm not going to really commit to additional funding at this point until we have a chance to look at the budget. I am running my platform on honesty, and I'm not committing to anything that I can't deliver on. So once I look at the budget, then I'll consider that. In saying that, though, youth are a member of our most vulnerable populations, and they're one of our most valuable populations as well. So we need to put money and resources into our youth. We have huge dropout rates, we have huge substance abuse rates, suicide rates within youth are huge. So we need to actually look at that, and what is there to do for youth in our communities. You know, when my own children were growing up, I used to worry because unless they were active in sports, there was nothing here for them. So I think we do need to invest in youth. I'm just not sure how much because I haven't seen the budget.
Thank you. Daryl Delaney?
Yeah, thank you. I think Mr. Antoine for the question here. Not seeing the true parameters around this $300 million national growth strategy initiative, it's very difficult for us to do a parity in terms of mirroring or doing something at a local level. So I'll answer the question based on what I think the person's asking. And I do support that we need to look at every facet of our budget to support infrastructure in our communities that deals with youth. And we also went through a full review of the Mental Health Act, and we clearly heard that the youth were somewhat omitted within the parameters of the Mental Health Act. And there was suggestions and also acceptance by the Minister of Health that we would need to do a full youth strategy around mental health and addiction. So I think that I'm definitely happy to hear that. Other than that, we would have to take a look at a full budget in terms of whether or not we'd be able to add and complement what it's currently being offered at the federal initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll head to Cam Lake and start with Kieran to start.
Yeah, it's great to see the federal government stepping up for a very important area of our economy and our population. I think young people can be great economic actors, and all too often when they get started in their professional careers in the North, they experience a lot of challenges. Bringing down our cost of living and creating more opportunities for young people to participate in the economy is good and required if we're going to move forward. By investing in arts, culture, and film, as well as digital infrastructure, we can create more opportunities in an expanded knowledge economy. This is an industry that's the next generation of professionals is really accessing, and you can do it from home. You can do it digitally. So these are areas that we are working on with a fiber optic link, and we should work on other ways to expand those opportunities and make them more accessible to young people who want to seek those opportunities, and provide funding targeted towards those knowledge economy jobs, the jobs of tomorrow, that are going to help people find a role, a niche for them in the Northwest Territories, that they can diversify our economy and find meaningful employment that engages them. Thank you.
Thank you. David Ramsey.
Thanks very much for the question. The federal government has made a lot of promises during the recent campaign, and this is one of them. And it really does remain to be seen, how the Northwest Territories can benefit from this funding, the $300 million. What will our allocation be? Will we be able to leverage some of our dollars with these federal dollars? Will it be application based? A lot of this remains to be seen. But certainly the youth are very important, and any extra funding that we can receive from the federal government will be put to good use here in the Northwest Territories, and we'll have to see where that greatest need is and make the investments accordingly. But I really think it's a bit premature until we get the money and we get a better understanding of how we can access it and what we can use it for. Then we can make some decisions accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. In Great Slave, we're going to start with Glenn Abernathy.
I tend to agree with Dave. I mean, until we know what those dollars are going to be for, how they're going to be allocated, how we as a territory can access them, and what our allocation would be, it's a little difficult for us to talk about how we're going to utilize those dollars here in the Northwest Territories. The 18th Assembly is definitely going to have to keep this on the radar and keep an eye on where those dollars are going to be coming. In the Northwest Territories around youth, we are doing a number of things to try and encourage youth to come back and to stay in the Northwest Territories. We've recently changed our student financial assistance program, so it's basically zero interest for our residents who are returning, plus there's a little bit of a forgiveness. I think it's $2,000 a year that our students can get forgiven off their loans as an incentive for them to come back and work here in the Northwest Territories. For me, around youth, one of the things that I want to see as a priority in the 18th Assembly, and I'm hoping that the elected members feel the same way, is the development of a comprehensive youth mental health strategy. There's definite issues around the provision of mental health services here in the Northwest Territories for youth, especially as they transition from school age into adulthood. I've already directed the department to begin the preliminary work so that the next assembly has the information they need to work together with stakeholders to develop a comprehensive strategy, and I'm looking forward to seeing that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Clark.
When it comes to youth, and I guess a lot has been discussed already, but one big thing, and I'm glad that there's a comprehensive youth mental health strategy coming out, because we have amongst the highest rate of youth suicide in the country, and it's really sad to see. And I think a lot of that has to stem from, old social issues that need to be resolved through counseling and whatnot. And I think that needs to become more of a societal norm for people to be able to do those things. But I think a lot of it also comes from boredom and not having a lot to do. I know growing up here, if you didn't play sports or anything else, there wasn't a whole lot to do. So I think we really need to come up with some ways for that youth can have a different direction to complete things. I think that also youth need to have opportunities to see the world, or maybe have travel incentives through sport or through education, that they can get out of their communities and see other things, so that they don't feel so isolated, which I think is also a big problem. Thanks.
Thank you. In Frame Lake, we're going to start with Jan Fullerton.
Thank you. So since I was a youth myself, I've been actively involved with youth organizations. It's what I've been doing for the last 12 years, or last 10 years of my life, plus a couple of more years as a volunteer. I feel very passionately about youth options as well as youth empowerment. And part of what I do when I go out and do school presentations is I talk to the youth about finding ways to take the bull by the horns and basically start doing things in their own communities and not wait for it to be done by government, or not wait for it to be done by the adults in their communities. Because I'm not sure when we will get all of that done for them. And I think there are things that youth can do. And I spoke with somebody recently who talked about when she was young growing up in Tuktoyaktuk, and she would sneak into the rec center and open it up and organize dances and have everybody come in for the dances and stuff. And I suspect that somebody probably knew that she was sneaking in and organizing these things, and eventually she became the recreation coordinator there before they implemented stricter rules about who could be the recreation coordinator. So I think that empowering our youth and encouraging them to take the leadership on these things is a good part of what we can do. Beyond that, I think there's some nonprofits in the Northwest Territories that are doing some excellent work, including Skills Canada Northwest Territories, sporting organizations, YWCA, Side Door, arts and culture organizations. So I think we should continue to support nonprofits, and I hope that we can find funding to do more through the territorial government, but in the meantime, there are other options, and I think we should move forward with them.
Thank you. Kevin O'Reilly.
Thanks, and thanks to Celine and Fort Simpson for the question. I think, like some others have said, we don't really know what the Northwest Territories might get allocated, whether it's going to be matching funding. I think it's going to probably take a while for it to work its way through the federal budget system itself. But I like Glenn's idea of a youth strategy. I think that's would be a good initiative to help focus investments that might come our way from the federal government. I think it would be really important, though, to make sure that youth are actually involved in defining what those priorities and projects might be. Maybe a Northwest Territories Youth Council or regional councils could help fill some of that role. I think schooling alternatives is something that we need to look at, recreational opportunities for youth. Our kids were involved in youth parliaments. These are important things for building our future leaders. And if we can take advantage of some federal money, we should, and a youth strategy, I think, would go a long way to identifying some of those priorities, but get the youth involved in defining what they are.
Thank you. Roy Erasmus.
Thank you. I also agree that we need to see the details of the program. For one thing, those types of money are usually allocated based on population. And if you look at our population, we're probably not going to get that great amount of money. But I do know that we need to get our youth through schools, and we need to get them through school with a decent education. That means that we need to fix the social passing, and we also have to get parents engaged in their children's education, because you can have the best education system in the world, but if the kids aren't in school, they're not going to get very far. I also agree with Glenn that we need to develop a strategy for mental health of the youth. And at my work at the Department of Education, we realized that we really need to work with parents on parenting skills. And it's very difficult to do, but we have to grab the bull by the horns and do it. Otherwise, our kids are not gonna get too far, many of them. A lot of the social issues have been caused by residential schools. I think it's incumbent that we educate people on the causes or the effects of residential schools so that they know what's happening and why. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we'll have David Waseltsu.
I think it's safe to say that no one at this table knows the full details of the federal government program, and it'd be really great to find out when the details are available. However, in the meantime, there are other federal government programs that have been existing for youth employment and youth engagement in the North. I'm involved with the Computers for Schools program, which has a youth employment program in the communities for hiring interns and doing technical training. It's been a great opportunity over the years. It hasn't always been fully utilized, but maximizing some of these existing opportunities is something that we should make a priority territorially. It's sometimes been difficult to engage the GNWT in that sort of programming and building on some of the existing federal programs, so we have to enhance that. As well, like others have said, we have to look at our education system and make sure parents and families are involved in the education system and the development of the curriculum. It's really important to make sure that kids are able to get through school and they have the outcomes that we need them to have. Just because you're graduating grade 12 these days doesn't always mean you're at that level, and we need to make sure that when you graduate, you are at that level. We need to make sure that you have the ability to choose what you do next, and you've been given those tools to do that. At the same time, we have some interesting challenges in communities with more and more connectivity coming with the Valley Fiber, with 3G cell phones in communities, with distance education and distance learning. Communities are having youth able to stay in the community longer than they ever had before, and those communities don't have the infrastructure and the programming set up to help engage the youth while they're there. So we need to work with those communities to make sure that if youth choose to do that, that they have, frankly, activities and positive choices to make. It's about having them active in sports and arts and volunteering activities. Thank you.
Okay, we're getting pretty close to the end here. We were hoping to end at 9 o'clock. On average, it takes about 20 minutes to get through everybody, and it's 13 minutes to 9 at this point. So we have a couple of options, and I'm being asked to go with one more question. Okay. And I know there is a lineup of questions. We did have somebody approach before you stood up the wait. So. Okay.
Amos, if I could, what's stopping us from staying an extra half hour, 45 minutes?
That's what I wanted to hear. Let's go with the question. Okay, so we'll go with the question, and then I'll get your comment, and that's how we'll end the Q&A portion of the evening. And from the Q&A portion, we'll go into final statements, and that will conclude this evening's presentation. So, question from the floor, please.
Thank you, Amos, and I just want to thank all the candidates for being here tonight. And win or lose, I think each and every one of you should be commended for putting yourself forward and giving the electorate some choices that can be made. Having said that, being a resident of the Frame Lake area, my question is directed to the four candidates from the Frame Lake area. And Mr. Abernathy alluded to it, and certainly the Minister of Finance has talked about it a number of times. There's some great fiscal challenges that await you should you be the successful candidate that's elected. So given the fiscal situation of the GNWT and the need to make some tough choices while working strategically and collaboratively and cooperatively with Cabinet and all the other MLAs from across the Northwest Territories, and tell us what skills you possess that you'll bring to the table that will help build and maintain consensus on the big picture issues that are facing all Northerners. And not only talk about your skills, but if you can give us an example where you've built consensus in the past. Thank you.
Mr. Daniels, for those listening, that was Dan Daniels asking the question. Can you just confirm, is that just the Frame Lake riding we'd like a response from?
Yes, primarily, and if anybody else wants to answer that, that's fine as well.
Okay, so we will begin with Dave. David Waseltsu is the first one to answer that question.
Oh, good, the short and easy question. Thanks for the question, Dan. The fiscal realities of the government have been talked about a lot, and it's something that I think, while we paint it as a very bleak picture, I think there's still a lot of opportunity there to change that. Personally, I've been involved with a number of organizations, including nonprofits, trying to build consensus and deliver programming in the North. I'm highly involved with the runnings of daycare and preschools, so I think that's clearly got some focus in it, depending on the level of discussion. But really, I think there's opportunities. For a while, I was running immigration programming in the GNWT. And looking at that and our investments in growing the population and how that impacts our revenue, I think there are some direct comparatives and some direct and easy ways we can do things like increasing our population and driving our revenue streams up. It doesn't necessarily need to put us in a situation where our revenues are steadily declining the entire time. As well, I've led a number of organizations. Right now, I run the school PAC at NJ and bring our parents together, and we've looked at investments and all kinds of things to do in the school. On the side of that, I bring a significant skill base on government transparency and accountability, something I've been dedicated to for the past number of years. I've developed an online tool, an organization, OpenNWT, that focuses on making government more accessible to the people, making spending, making programs and discussions at the government level, something that's achievable and something that's accessible by the public. And I think that's a really important piece of a government. Fiscal realities need to be discussed openly. Thank you.
Roy Erasmus, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question, Dan. Well, I have been working for a long time for the territorial government. I've also worked for Aboriginal organizations, and I do know many of the MLAs because I've traveled to many of the communities. So I believe that my knowledge of those people and their familiarity with me would help to build consensus with on various issues. And an example is, I guess, when I was working at the Department of Education, we had to work together with the schools and the Aboriginal leadership and people so that we could get support for the Aboriginal Student Achievement Program. So I instituted that, and we contacted all the organizations and all the regional Aboriginal organizations, and brought the school boards all together, and we came up with an education plan that all of us agreed upon. So that is my example of building consensus on a strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Kevin, please.
Thanks, Dan, for the question. I want to sort of answer it in two different ways. You mentioned the fiscal challenges that GNWT faces, and I served 9 years on City Council. The annual budget for the city at that time was about $25 to $30 million. It was a very complex budget because it involved operations and maintenance, program services, also capital assets and how to manage those over time, a bunch of different reserves. I think I had a good handle on the budget, certainly by the end of 9 years, and there was lots of vigorous debate and discussion in council and at committee meetings and from the public about how to manage the finances of the city. I've worked for a small NGO here in Yellowknife where our annual budget is about $650,000, and I think we've worked very well with that budget and got good value for money, and the agency that I've worked for has a good reputation. But most of my working life has been in consensus building places with boards and diverse interests, trying to bring those together and reach good outcomes. Probably my best example of building consensus is the Giant Mine Environmental Agreement. I was working with a small NGO, Alternatives North, and worked very closely with the city and Yellowknife's Dene First Nation, North Slave Métis Alliance. We were negotiating together with the federal and territorial government. It took us less than a year, and we actually reached a good agreement.
Thank you, Kevin. Jan Fullerton, please.
So like some of my colleagues here, I do have extensive nonprofit background. I served on my first board when I was 16 years old, which was actually the president of a Black cultural organization, so that's kind of a different story in itself. Since then, I've served on a number of boards. I've worked for a nonprofit for the last 10 years, so I've been on both sides. And one thing with working heavily in the nonprofit industry is you really have to do a lot of compromising and cooperating and team building. And I find, particularly here in the North, that most boards that I've served with, either as an employee or sitting on the board as chair or in other roles, most of them do always try for consensus first. They will fall back to votes if they have to, but they will generally try for consensus first. Beyond that, largely because of my experience with boards, I consider myself to be fairly persuasive, and I also consider myself to be determined. So when the persuasive alone isn't enough in the first try, then I'll keep trying and find other ways to go about pursuing a goal. As far as a specific example, it's hard when you've been working in a nonprofit environment that long to pull out a specific example, but one that I would draw on is I've been on a couple of boards where we've rewritten mission statements. And a mission statement isn't something that you can do through a vote. You can't say that you're going to impose a mission statement on some people. It really is something that you have to work together collectively because it's about the future direction of the organization. So I have done that with the Aurora Art Society. I've done that with the Great Slave Cruising Club, and I've done that with some other organizations as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been asked to make an announcement about anybody parking in the federal parking lot across, that your vehicle will be towed. So maybe some people are moving now. Thank you so much for coming. If you don't come back, I hope you do. I see that there's someone waiting to ask a question. We are going to prioritize questions rather than comments, so I hope that there is a question in there for the candidates. Okay, thank you.
My name is Janaki Balakrishnan. I have been a good citizen of Yellowknife for more than 2.5 years. The reason I ask this question is I have been in the Canadian workforce for more than 25 years in different provinces and different territories in a non-traditional profession as an engineer, working with mostly men. When the question was asked why we do not have many Aboriginal women in the lead role in the government, some of the answers came as mentoring and training and all those are required. Why did those answers come always when it comes to women? That's my question. But however, why I ask this question is probably that might help you. I have seen men getting many positions, but they did not undergo the same kind of training and mentoring. That comes out of contacts and friendships. But that doesn't, apply to many women when they go in. So this is one. The women generally lead their homes. Women generally lead community work, voluntary works, and why that leadership is lacking when it comes to jobs. If a man is taking a job, then the man demands, I need this group of staff for me, then only I can take a job. And that person takes the job, then after that he moves up and he moves up and moves up. But when a woman has to come to a leadership position, then we plan for a big mentoring and training.
I'm going to have
that
to
is
ask
what
you
my question was.
to ask a question.
So probably you don't need not to answer that, but these are viewpoints of women, those who have worked in the workforce, and then probably you have to streamline your strategies in the future for women. Thank you.
I wasn't sure there was a question in there, but did anybody feel like they wanted to respond to that? Or do we want to move on? Did you want to ask a question, madam? Okay, so why the focus on mentoring and training for women rather than for men? Okay, okay, sure. Okay, Glenn Abernathy.
Thank you. I was the one who mentioned mentoring and training through the Associate Director Training Program. Just for the record, that program is a program that exists today, and actually I believe more men have actually run through that program than women at this particular point. What I was suggesting is recognizing that we have this discrepancy. We've already got the training program in place. Let's target some of the training for individuals, Indigenous Aboriginal women who have moved up through the system but may lack some technical or program skills. Let's put them in. Let's get them trained. We've got the program. Let's use it. Right now, it's being used. I think in the last couple of years, we've had, I think it's 4 or 5 associate director through there, and I think there was only 1 woman. So I'm suggesting there's an opportunity here to utilize existing programs.
Thank you. And did anyone? Okay, Chris Clark.
Sorry, just quickly, I think that this isn't just about training of women or men, and I don't think that it's a thing that has to happen because of jobs at later in life. This is something that is a change of societal norms, and it's changing slowly over time, but it definitely needs to change more quickly. We need to instill in the values of our children that that there's equality amongst men and women, and I think that that's going to be a process that's going to help to make things equitable over time. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to weigh in on this? Okay, Caroline. And I wanted to apologize that you never got to weigh in on the consensus issue, so we can reopen that if people want to continue to comment on Mr. Daniel's question from before, which I'd forgotten wasn't solely directed at Frame Lake. Thank you.
So I want to address that and say, yes, you're absolutely right. There is still gender inequality. Women still have a glass ceiling. We're allowed to get so far in society, and then we tend to get pushed down. However, when women strive to get into leadership and management positions, we're often called aggressive instead of assertive. Whereas men can criticize, they can yell, they can scream, and there's nothing called to them. So we have a long way to go, undoubtedly. But if we don't continue with the small steps, we will never get there. So we just need to keep the fight going.
All right, Daryl Delaney.
Thank you. No, it's a good question, and I think it kind of dovetails on what we talked about earlier this evening. As I said, we can do many things here to decrease that pay equity gap and that fairness and gender-based equality. Globe and Mail had a recent article on October 10th, and it talked about the gap that we still see today in Canada, and that gap is the women earn on average 73 cents for every dollar earned by men. And that's disturbing. Now, there has been some increase, but it's as I said earlier, we've got a stagnation in Canada, and we also have that in the Northwest Territories. As I said earlier, we can do things to help narrow that gap. We can do forced disclosure legislation, put a little sunshine on these discrepancies, and put pressures to change our behavior, and put a benchmark for employers and NGOs. We can set up a voluntary pledge sheet with NGOs and businesses to campaign to close this gap as well. And you know what? We need to work towards gender equality. You know, this is morally the right thing to do. And I think if we want a financial and stable economy, we've got to narrow that gap. So I thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. Did any of the other candidates want to respond to that? Okay, thank you, David.
I'm just going to say this briefly, but I really appreciate the question and the comment. Frankly, as a parent, I don't want my daughter to grow up in a world where things are completely different like that. The language isn't right, and the programming balances aren't right, and the way we talk about some of these differing programs doesn't need to be the case, and it shouldn't be. We need to have equity in employment. We need to have senior management positions that are reflective of the position. Non-traditional jobs shouldn't be non-traditional jobs. I mean, all positions should be traditional for both genders, and I think that's something that's really important to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Unless anyone else wants to say something, I think we have time for another question here, if there was someone. Okay.
Thank you. I would like to ask a question about, my understanding is that the Salvation Army asks clients there to leave at 6:45 in the morning. The day shelter does not open until 8 o'clock. I wrote to all of the MLAs and I asked what could be done to open the shelter earlier so at least they would have a place to go for that extra hour. And at that point, the banks were closing their doors. They had no foyers and nowhere to go to. And that was before we understood what kind of a winter we were up for. Thankfully, it's been warm, and so it hasn't been too bad, although I have still seen people sleeping in bank doorways or whatever. Now, I had two responses from two of the MLAs. One said that he thought that the hours we were provided, or they were provided, was adequate. And we were lucky to have that. And the other answer I got was that they were also provided with warm clothing, so they should be good for that extra hour. Now, I would like to know what immediate action could be done to accommodate these people. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm guessing that what question was directed to all candidates? Okay, sure. We will start in Frame Lake. And we're going to start with Roy Erasmus.
Well, that's a good question. I know that I certainly see people, and I wonder how they're surviving. You can go out pretty early in the morning and you see people out there really freezing. So I would suggest that we have to change the mandate of the shelter. I mean, the service is needed, so let's just change the mandate. I mean, I know I sure wouldn't want to be out on the streets, and people don't want them in the banks. They don't want them in the hotel. So if the shelter is there, then let's change the hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin O'Reilly.
Sorry, thanks, Nancy, for the question. This is not something that I'm an expert in by any stretch, but I know Lydia is an expert, and she's sitting in the back there. So I'd like to chat with somebody like Lydia about this, but I don't, and we're going to do that. But I do think that this seems to be a gap that needs to be dealt with, and probably facilitating some sort of a meeting between the Salvation Army, the city, the folks that run the day shelter as well, and GNWT to try to come up with a solution would be a good approach, particularly to get something immediate. I think over the longer term, I've talked to the mayor about this, the idea of a task force. Part of the issues with standing committees and so on, there just hasn't really been a firm strategy developed and a really good follow-up. So I've talked to Mark about this, and I like the idea of a task force with a defined time frame to get something together, and then people go off and do the work to implement it. And the City of Victoria took that approach, and it worked quite successfully, and it's something that I'd like to work with Mark and Lydia and other folks on when I get elected. Thanks.
Jan.
So the first response I have is I don't think that either of those responses you got from sitting MLAs are acceptable answers. I think to say that the hours are okay and that they have warm clothing and that there's not an issue, I wouldn't want to be out in the street for an hour and 15 minutes at that time of day or at any other time of day in certain temperatures. So that's the most important part of my response is I would not take that as an answer that I'd be prepared to walk away from. Beyond that, and this sort of ties into what Kevin's comments, is the first thing I would do is go to both of those agencies and ask what are the barriers to them extending their hours to close that gap? Is it staffing? Is it funding? Is it something to do with the program schedule they have that day? I find it hard to believe, having had contact with both of those agencies, that they actually would consider it to be an acceptable solution either. So I would think that there must be some other barrier that's making it difficult for them to close that gap, and then I would look at how we can provide the resources that are needed or support them getting the resources.
Thank you. David.
Thank you very much for the question. The only thing worse in that situation, frankly, is the answers you got when you sent letters into MLAs. Right off the bat, the first thing that can happen is we're meeting with the Salvation Army to extend their hours. The day shelter's running under a contract with the GNWT. Changing a contract with them takes forever and a day. But we need to work with the shelters. If the Salvation Army, frankly, is the only one, and my seatmate here reminds me that the hours of the other shelters in town certainly aren't the same. It doesn't make any sense for that to be continuing or the case. Frankly, if the Salvation Army won't open for their proper hours, we should tie the hours to the funding they get for the shelter beds. We need to make sure that the services available in town are what's needed by the community and what's available. Whether or not the city is going to have working groups and committees or task forces or whatever they're going to do, this is a problem we can solve before that. This isn't something that we need a long time to solve. I'm surprised that this government has not been able to address this issue prior to this election or with any of these services in place, but we should definitely get the doors open at either the Salvation Army a little longer and the day shelter a little earlier, and in fact we should probably have both. We should have the day shelter open earlier and the Salvation Army should be open longer, and if it takes using the funding tools that we have, we should use that. Thanks.
Thank you, David. I'm going to end that question there for a couple of reasons. Let me explain. We did have a homelessness question to begin the evening, and so the other candidates here have had the opportunity to answer a homelessness question. And secondly, the rest of these ridings, we have current sitting MLAs. And the format for this evening was ask of respect for the current system now. And so this is a bit of an attack on the system. So I'm going to be a bit of a referee in order to allow this evening to end. And partly because I want to have enough time to hear from the rest of all these candidates, their final closing statement and why they want to run in this election. So with that, we will proceed. I'm going to do so, and I will take responsibility for making that decision, and you can come and direct anger at me if need be, but that's where we're going to go. So also, the candidates have 45 seconds. And I noticed in the opening statement, it made it a bit rushed, so we're going to make it 60 seconds, just so they have a little bit of breathing room to speak at a rate that is understandable. Okay. But all at the same time. Okay, so random pick of ridings. We will start in the Frame Lake riding. And we started with Roy Erasmus, please.
Thank you. Like I said earlier, the reason I'm running is because I'm I'm not very happy with the way some of the programming is being delivered through the territorial government. Things are, well, I guess they're just not being run properly. Like, it would take too long to start giving examples, but there's so many changes that are required that I really want to move forward on some stuff, and so I put my name forward, and it's something that there has to be a fresh approach taken. We can't just continue the way things are going. Like I said before, the people need to get through school properly, and there's at least one area there.
That's your minute, Roy.
Sorry.
Thank you
I
very
just
much.
went brain dead for a minute.
It's been a long evening. You've all done a commendable job. David Waseltsu, please.
Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for coming out tonight and staying for even a little longer than you'd originally signed up for. I mean, the reason I'm running is to change the tone in the House. Right now, I don't think we actually focus on building consensus and getting work done. We don't bring together members, and the House doesn't act in an open and transparent fashion. We need to change that. We need to make sure Northerners, Northern families, and everyone who lives up here is put first in decision-making, and we have to reflect our decisions on people's daily lives. Personally, I have a strong background in developing policy for government. I've worked strong in the community. I volunteer with schools. I volunteer on family violence. I work with technology organizations. I've spent years building tools for accountability and transparency for government. And at the same time, frankly, I'm a parent, and I live in the community and face the same challenges as everyone else. You know, knocking on doors, I have the same, somebody was running out yesterday trying to get to Girl Guides, and I've been there, and I'm in the same boat. And I think we need representatives that are reflective of the community, and we need some balance in the House of people of all different walks of life. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Jan Fullerton, please.
So all of my colleagues, not just in my riding, but in all ridings, we all have different priorities. So I just want to reinforce for everybody here that my priorities are education from early childhood through to post-secondary, health, especially mental health and addictions, and which I feel are sincerely and severely underserved in the Northwest Territories, and a healthy economy with responsible resource development as well as economic diversification. But I believe that we haven't laid appropriate groundwork for economic diversification, and that's going to take time. So I do believe that we need to continue having responsible resource development to carry us through while we diversify an economy. My full platform is available at janfullerton.ca, and if anybody has any questions or concerns, I certainly welcome any discussion.
Thank you, Jan. And Kevin O'Reilly.
Thanks, Amos. First of all, I want to thank Dene Nahjo for putting this forum on this evening. You know, sitting here listening, I think any of the candidates that you've heard probably could do a good job maybe in the Assembly. But I think you need to think about what it is that are your priorities and what you want to see in your MLA. And we all come with a diverse set of interests, and I think it's really important that those diverse sets of interests and experience get reflected in the Assembly. Personally, I've lived in the riding for 24 years. I think I've got a strong track record, including experience on City Council here for 3 terms, 9 years. I've worked in the NGO sector. I've worked for the territorial government, federal government. I've got a strong track record of working with Aboriginal governments and building consensus results. I think I've got the ideas, determination to serve as your MLA, and I look forward to the opportunity to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin O'Reilly. Next up, we have Cam Lake. We'll start with David Ramsey.
Thanks, Amos, and I want to thank the moderators. I want to thank the audience for your attention this evening and your participation in asking questions. I go back to a question that Dan Daniels asked, and that's about building consensus and what experience you have in building consensus. And in order to build consensus, you need to have trust and respect of the other members of the legislature. And in order to get into our cabinet, you need to have the support of the members of the House. You serve at the pleasure of the House. So you have that respect, you have that trust that's put in you by all the other members in the legislature to carry out the work on behalf of the people of the Northwest Territories, their constituents, my constituents, And I've certainly enjoyed my time as a cabinet minister, and I've enjoyed the 12 years that the folks in Cam Lake have put, you know, their trust in me in being their MLA, and it certainly has been an honor and a privilege. And I certainly want to continue on in that role for the next 4 years, so we can make the Northwest Territories the best place that it possibly can be. Thank you.
Kieran Testard.
And I want to thank everyone again for coming out and participating in this great event. This election is your opportunity to bring ambition and optimism to the Legislative Assembly. My plan offers to do something you've been asking for, provide real solutions to the challenges we face. Our next government must operate openly in full partnership with Indigenous peoples and nations, and work together with all levels of government to build a prosperous future. My plan will create jobs and economic opportunities, take action on addictions, poverty, and homelessness, and respect our shared history as we work towards settling land claims and implementing self-government agreements. On November 23rd, you can make a stronger democracy and a stronger economy possible by voting for me as your MLA for Cam Lake. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kieran. We're going to do Range Lake riding next, and Caroline Cochran.
I was raised within a mineral exploration family, and I spent years and years within finance management until my second child was born. And then I entered into the social work profession, where I've been in management positions ever since. Working within the social work field has actually given me the privilege to learn many of the traditional values and understand the need to consider all factors when addressing social issues. I come from a balanced background with the finance, management, and mineral exploration and social issues, and my campaign centers around balance between a strong economy, healthy families, and sustainable environment. All of them are intertwined, and each one needs to be considered in order to make decisions, because if you only stress on one, then the other two will get neglected. So balance is where I come from, and balance is what we need in governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Mr. Darrell Delaney.
Great, thank you. Let's say merci to everyone who's been with us here this evening. It's been a long night, and I appreciate it. To our organizers, Dene Nahjo, thank you very much. It was very well run, and I appreciate it. And to our moderators and everyone behind the scenes. And to my running mate, Carolyn, you've been a joy to work with, and I know you're working very hard, and I appreciate that. And to all my colleagues here, it takes a lot of guts to come up in front and do things for the community, so I appreciate what you're doing. You know, the one thing that I've learned in my 4 years of office is that being a member of the Legislative Assembly doesn't change who you are. It actually reveals who you are, and I think I've learned that in those 4 years. We all know that the NWT is at a crossroads, and we have some serious roadblocks ahead of us, and we're going to be needing people to get us over those roadblocks, and I hope you can count on me to do the work that is needed. My experience, my dedication is a reflection of the type of MLA that you will get on Election Day. So it's been a privilege and honor serving Range Lake, and it's been a privilege and honor serving all Northerners. Merci.
Okay, in our last riding, I'm going to give the first word to Chris Clark and the last word to Glenn Abernathy.
So I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I really look forward to working with people and to hearing people to make things better. I think that it's been a long time that, you know, the quality of life for many people up here hasn't happened, and I think that really needs to be pushed forward in the next assembly. And I really wanted to say thank you to my mother, Vivian McQueen, who's at the back. She got me to where I am today. Actually, she gave me a ride here, so she literally did. Actually, she didn't give me a ride here, but she is a big influence on my life, and just thank you, Mom. And everyone else, too.
Thank you, Chris. Mr. Glenn Abernathy.
Thank you. I'd just like to start off by thanking the moderators and Dene Nahjo for holding the forum, and thank you all for coming. I know it's been a long evening. I'm running for a number of reasons. I've been the Minister of Health and Social Services for the last 2 years. In the last 2 years, we've made significant progress on a number of files, whether it's the amalgamation of the health authorities that'll give us real opportunities to make real change in the life of the next assembly, or whether it's Child and Family Services, where we're taking the Child and Family Services in a new direction with a focus on families, the Health Information Act, the Mental Health Act. All of this has happened in 2 years, and the reason I bring that up is because we only have 4 years as MLAs, and you need to take action the minute you get there, and you need to be willing to work hard. Consensus government only works if you're willing to work hard. and I'm willing to continue to work hard for the residents of Great Slave and the residents of the Northwest Territories to ensure that we do have a strong and resilient and healthy Northwest Territories. I'd like to continue to do the work, and I'm looking forward to your support for the 18th Assembly. Thank you very much.
And that concludes tonight's Yellowknife, the first of two Dene Nahjo Yellowknife Election Forum. I now would like to take this time just to thank everyone. I'm going to first off thank Mandy McDonald for keeping time this evening.
Thank you, Mandy.
Iris Catholic for helping organize tonight's event, Eugene Belanger for doing the streaming, and Ryan over at Pedo for always knocking it out of the park. And most off, I'd like to thank the candidates for being here, for the patience of tonight's evening, and for putting all the hard work you obviously did to prepare for today. So thank you very much, and best of luck in your campaign. So for everybody else, we are redoing this tomorrow for the remaining Yellowknife ridings, and we begin tomorrow at 6 o'clock, as we did tonight, and we will probably end at 9:30. So a must-see show.